Good evening, and thank you for coming, and we have guests tonight. This is a continuation of a discussion we had at the last meeting, and I think a couple of you weren't at the last meeting, so we might want to fill you in. Oh, here comes our sixth. So we went through various properties, and you're aware of all the properties because we visited all of them. Does anybody need to do a recap of what we did that wasn't here on the properties that we had, or do they have the?
We can do a quick recap of kind of at least what the group's discussion was, or summarization of last.
Let's do that for you, just so that everybody's on the same page here. We'll go back and start with 1177, 1179 Bay Road. That was the property, if you remember, was abutting the commercial property to the south, and then the single-family residential to the north. The committee looked at the proposal and noted that some type of transitional buffer might be appropriate for that, and I think we looked at the possibility of, I think, townhouse or MR is one of the two.
MR was requested, so that was...
And his intent was not to build an apartment complex, as you would think, but pretty much to build like another duplex unit to the back of where that one tree is, where the building is. Going to take that down and then build back there. And he was pretty sensitive to the situation to the north of the single-family residence, so he's trying to stay away from them. So I think the committee supported the proposal to use some kind of a transitional zone. The second one was the one at 1423 Empire Boulevard. That's the one that had the one property, the two zoning districts running through it. The LaSalle's Landing to the north and the R120 to the south. The committee did not think that extending the LaSalle's Landing district was appropriate because it allowed for too many uses that could be conflicting with the residents to the east, but felt that a multi-residential, like townhouse development unit might be appropriate to act as a transition from the single-family detached along these two cul-de-sacs, and then the commercial that's abutting it on Empire Boulevard. So I think we're looking at a townhouse development project at that site if possible, or zoning at that site. The next one was just right up the street from that, and that was the property that was the former Hilltop Market. It's zoned R112 right now, and I don't think anybody's going to believe that anybody wants to build a house on Empire Boulevard as a housing project, and it's probably not a good idea based on access to and from Empire Boulevard. Anyways, we looked at the possibility of putting in an R112 zoning, putting in an LB zoning, which is abutting really what's going on across the street. They have an LB zoning over there. Again, the idea of using LaSalle's Landing could open up some opportunities that would not be in concert with the residences to the east. So,
and that's with buffering to the residences to the east on Littlewood Lane, and
they would have to add some buffering as any condition of any development on the site. So
East and south.
We're looking at that as a transition to Empire Boulevard.
so these were, say, recommendations of the committee, those that were here. I see we kind of worked last time on a show of hands, went with the majority on them. Again, these are recommendations in the document to the town board. Obviously, the town board ultimately would decide yea or nay, but these were at least moving forward what we were kind of...
So the next one, and actually we have the owners here, the Bendels are here tonight to listen to your discussion. It's the property 1271 Fairport 9 Mile Point Road. The Bendel family owns the property. It's been Walsh's nursery for years. They've had some offers over the last couple of years to have their property developed to butt to Abington. They actually did go to the town board. God, it's got to be 2 years now, maybe. Even more. I always say it's something that's probably add on 5 more years and you'll get there, but the intent was they did get an incentive zoning proposal conceptually approved by the town board to kind of continue on, and I think it was for 27 units if I'm not mistaken, Bill. The problem with incentive zoning though is when you're the property owner, it's kind of a hardship because the developer has to pay you for the value of your property, and then they have to come in and pay the town to allow for any kind of incentive zoning project on the property. So you're basically paying twice for the same property. And Bill recognizes that and is basically saying that, you know, I've got that 27 units if I want it, but I prefer to have a higher density so that I don't have to go through the incentive zoning process to get to where I need to be for the higher density. And I just wanted to, I don't know if anybody has their has their comprehensive plan from 2010. But this area, and I'll just read this, high-density residential was recommended for a couple of areas in town. One was at south of 441 on both sides of Fellow Road. That ended up being higher development in terms of a single-family detached development on the east side of, I'm sorry, on the west side of Fellows, and a townhouse project on the east side of Fellows that were constructed after the comp plan went into effect. The other one was on the north of Plank Road, east of Jackson Road, and west of Route 250. This area is intended to extend the existing higher density development pattern within the village of Webster into Penfield. So, if you get a chance, that's on page 135. If you get a chance just to look at it. Yeah, there you go. One more. There you go. No, you're missing.
There we go.
There it is. So it's the second. It's the second one, and then it talks a little bit about the fact that back in that day, that area had quick access to sanitary sewers. There was development taking place that was of a higher density already anyways. We actually rezoned some of the properties along Jackson and State that were pre-existing non-conforming lots that were half-acre lots into R120 zoning. So, and then you had Rudy Neufeld building Abington Place at a higher density through incentive zoning, so they felt it was appropriate to be able to utilize that area for higher density. It did not extend eastward on the other side of Route 250, but stayed within the confines of Jackson and 250 north of Plank. So this area, that the Vendel zone, is also in that area. So there was a rationale for going to a higher density in that area. The question that we had at the last meeting, though, is they've asked for it, but does it make sense to continue on to follow through with the comp plan in 2010 to look at other properties in that area that could go to a higher density? Now, as we've talked in the past, Webster's been having some sanitary issues, some capacity issues up there.
And those are being resolved.
They're being
right now,
resolved, and
so-
they are going to have them resolved in a reasonable time frame. So there will be access to sanitary sewers based on the fact that you're either going to do it through a gravity system, or you might have to have a regional pump system to accommodate it, but there will be access to sanitary sewers in the foreseeable future. And you can see Angian and White Spire, those were all constructed as R120 development, and then even on Alden Glen, those were actually 1 acre zone, but they, some of the lots were crunched a little bit under at 278, I believe.
Oh, yeah, this chunk of land.
Yeah, that was the
part of
remaining land that was left over for recreation/drainage purposes.
So at the last meeting, I think we ended at basically a 3-3, I say tie. We had a suggestion on the table, I think, of R112. Michael, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you would put out there, as an R112 for kind of extending that down for Abington, and then I think there was others that were leave it as it is and, let it take its course from there. So it was kind of a 3-3 at the last one. So we just said, okay, let's wait for, thankfully we got at least one more member tonight, more of the committee to come back and start a new discussion. As Jim said, we look at other parcels around that. Rolling to my memory, you were supportive of looking just at this one parcel because of gravity sewers. We weren't sure how much more gravity we could get as we headed further to the south. You were supportive of, doing a one. You got to look at spot zoning, but spot zoning if it's less than 10 acres. They're looking at rezoning more than 10 acres, so it doesn't fall under that caveat. If you're looking at like a 1 acre parcel or looking at half acre parcel just to rezone one little piece, then you got to worry about, the impact of what a spot zoning.
So how far down you had a tie of 3-3, how far down were you
It was
recommending?
just the immediate parcil south of where it says Maya. So
So
just that
can
one
he
parcel.
put the pointer on, just want to make sure I'm clear on what he's talking about.
Yep, so just that parcel east to west, that one parcel right there. Is that kind of
That's what was being requested. Then the committee came in and said, well, we should be looking at maybe a larger scale.
Yeah, because
Well,
I'm thinking if you take that whole square, if you take the one below, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels, you have 5 parcels.
And that actually, to the right of where Zach has his arrow, was our first incentive zoning, which is Fallow Funeral Home. So
Yeah.
that was the first incentive zoning project we had in town. They created the use to have a funeral home within a residential or RR2 zoning district. So that was incentive zoning to create that piece there.
So the concern with the expansion is the infrastructure necessary.
I think, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the committee.
Yeah, so I'm just
I'm
trying to understand what the folks that said no, beyond the capacity of the sewer, what were the other reasons behind?
I was wondering about traffic. We had talked earlier at one of the other meetings about, it's been quite a while since the town's done a town-wide traffic survey. Does it make sense to do something like that prior to starting to increase some of this density?
I mean, obviously, I'm thinking that's a recommendation coming out of this. We did the 250 corridor study, I think it was 2002? I think 2002.
It was a recommendation of the 2000 comp plan.
Well, out of the 2000 comp plan was the study, and I thought it was 2002. We did the 250, it was later than that, 2006 was the 250 corridor study.
Somewhere there.
think
We
it
talked
was-
about coming out doing a townwide,
I know that's probably
townwide
pretty
traffic
pricey,
study.
but I wonder.
Is it, is it necessary? We can probably generalize. If you have bigger lots, you're going to get bigger houses with families. If you have smaller lots, you're going to get smaller homes with probably empty nesters or the 55 and up who aren't getting kids on the school bus, who are either retired or approaching that age, so they're not going to have the impact during the rush hour on the traffic. From a sewer standpoint, whether you have 50 homes of 2 or 25 homes of 4, it's the same amount of flushes of the toilet every single day. So it's not an exact science, but it,
And so my assumption would be is that if any type of approval from the town for building would have to include that the infrastructure was in place. So even if we
absolutely.
make a recommendation for a
Absolutely.
rezoning, if they ultimately can't put in the infrastructure,
of course.
they're not going to be able to get
Or
the
if they
permit
have
to
to
build.
make, or if
George-
they have to make traffic improvements.
It's a good point, because that's why it's zoned R1, because they didn't have the infrastructure back in 1978.
That's where I was going with that,
They had to
okay.
do.
Obviously, if it can't support it, then it shouldn't happen. But
And
I'm also
that should be
thinking
the
about,
caveat, if you make the recommendation to go to higher density, it's got to be subject to having capacity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that would be my first
How
one,
deep
but
are the sewers there, Jason?
In Abington, I think they're about 8 feet deep, and they're to the property line, right versus Maya. They come down that stub. So
Manhole
there's-
right down to the end of the stub road?
It's not
There's
quite,
not a manhole
it
there.
goes
It's just
inward a little bit.
Well, it's just on the other side of the hedgerow, but there's a manhole at the intersection. There's basically a stub with a plug in it at the end of the line, so we don't have
what's the overall elevation difference there?
a,
7 feet?
not quite that. I mean,
I think there was going to have to be some fill put
maybe there would
on.
need to be some fill brought in to elevate that property. The Falvo property, which is the one with the pine trees on it,
Mm-hmm.
in the back is elevated. It's a little bit of a knoll on that piece.
But you can see there are some wetlands in that neighborhood, so there are some low spots.
There's federal wetlands in
And
there.
they can't develop those areas anyway, so.
Yep, that's,
Which is-
that was my, so I'm not,
And
yeah.
that's holistically what you gotta look at, the big picture. The farmland we're talking about there, it could be continued with that zoning. Further south, east and west you go, it's gonna be impacted by natural features of the wetlands anyways. So, you've gotta
And to the south,
take
we have,
you've gotta take a look at it case by case.
and to the south, there's RG&E who's not going anywhere right here.
Right, and that, yeah.
Just if you go back to the parcel above it. No, I'm
No,
sorry.
down, right there.
Down, so that's the 1300 parcel. And then one above it's a 12,
8.5.
because I'm assuming the one in front of that's the funeral home, right?
You're right.
That's not going anywhere.
No.
I mean, I don't, yeah. Okay.
Well, another argument for not going with such dense housing is that something that we've talked about and that we talked about last time, that we really don't want to be sort of building cookie cutter stuff. We don't want Penfield to be a cookie cutter town where you just go from one to another of these sort of dense things, as if you had, say, a bunch of apartment buildings on a big street or something like that. That we want to have transitional properties, that we want to have a sort of a different look and feel as you go through the town, and it's not like, well, that's the apartment end of town, and that's the fancy end of, so to have something that's more transitional, to have something like 1 acre lots, and then that gives you the opportunity to sort of shape your 1 acre lots based on those other land features that are there.
They won't build them as 1 acre lots though.
Yeah.
They'll use town law 278 because they'll have access to sewers, which means
Yeah.
they'll crunch all the lots together. They'll get the same number they're entitled to, and they'll crunch them all together, and you'll still have small lots.
So I'm going to ask a question. One of the driving points of our conversation was being able to provide housing that was more cost effective. So I don't know if that came into the conversation. We talked about the fact if you build smaller homes with the
Yeah,
pricing,
that's-
and it may not be. I'm just asking the question because that would be to me, part of the challenge we have is affordable housing in Penfield for young families coming in or even someone looking for a more
Very
affordable housing.
difficult,
So-
very difficult. It's a good point. The problem that you run into is even let's go up to Abington. Abington's got some pretty small lots,
Mhm.
and they got some pretty small houses,
Mhm.
and they're all paying gigantic taxes because what's in those houses is,
A lot of amenities.
a lot of amenities. And the one nice thing about that, though, is it did serve a purpose in terms of allowing people who had lived here a long time, who did not want to leave, to be able to go to a smaller house on a small lot with little maintenance, sell their home here to somebody else who is younger, hopefully, and is able to take the gauntlet and run with it at the other house. I don't think there's any kids in that entire neighborhood. There's nobody
aware
in
of.
the neighborhood. So there's no impact to the school district. It's the Webster School District. It's not the Penfield School District, but there's no impact to the district. There are people in there that do still work. I mean, they're young enough to continue working, but a lot of them don't work, and a lot of them don't impact the traffic at PM and peak periods. So we are looking for housing to accommodate young people coming in, although the housing MC, even the Ryan Homes are all $350,000, $379,000. So you're not gonna, unless you've owned a home somewhere else and you're selling that to move into it, you're probably not gonna be able to just buy a house for $379,000 as a
Unless
young
it's one of those
person.
empty nester situations, like you said.
Well, yeah, I mean.
No, and again, I didn't say it was an absolute possibility. I just wanted to dialogue about
But
that.
it's a problem, though, you're right, and it's something we have to think about, because you've got to have young people coming to the town, and you want to retain the elderly that have been here, that, it's a home to them, so.
Do you also want to put the young people right next to the older people? You move to what you think is a quiet, small, quaint neighborhood, and now you've got kids running up and down.
Yeah.
Route and Miller all summer long.
do we
It's how they're
have,
marketed, though,
Yeah.
really,
so question, if you scroll back down and with the lot we're talking about that they came in to talk to us about, the 1271, if you extended that higher density to that and then left the ones below that to the 1 acre, would that be a compromise that would make sense to people?
Well, currently this is zoned 2 acre, just to clarify the conversation. So currently, everything east of, you can kind of see
you
the,
see that line.
it's hard to see limey green to the left of. That's
Shade of green.
1 acre to
You
the
can see where it
west,
shows R1.
2 acre to
where
the
that
east. So
parcel
just
is.
as you're having the conversation, just make sure we clarify that currently they're all in 2 acre.
This
north and
stretch.
south.
Where is the new Ryan development going in?
Can you
Isn't there
move
one right
that
up the street
smaller?
going
It is kind of south and west from here a little bit. That was when we talked about it a little later. So you gotta
We're
come
talking
down.
Jackson Plank.
Yep, so come
Let me
down.
go down.
So it's on this side over here.
Yep.
That's the Lupo property on the north side. That's the Rubino property on the south side.
So that's going to be, what, half acre, $350,000 family
No.
homes?
Currently, it's 1 acre zoning. They're currently proposing to develop it as a cluster development. So we've talked a lot of, people want either smaller lots or, just not a big yard. So they're proposing 72 homes based on the acreage. So it's 1 acre zoning. They're proposing 72 homes, cluster them, have kind of one street that comes in and just kind of a J style that comes down, exact indicated in there, and then have homes kind of lining that piece, keep the treat areas as buffer areas to the existing neighbors. They'll have to put a pond in and then
Conservation easements to protect some trees here.
protect the trees with conservation easements. So
What
that-
was the results of the town board was looking into the sewer systems?
Where's it?
Yep, good conversation. So what they had originally proposed was doing low-pressure sewers. So basically, each home has an E1 pump. It's basically an individualized pump either in your basement or out in the front yard. based on where they are to get gravity. They couldn't get gravity to this property. Our closest sewer is over on Shoecraft Road. So they had come in with a development proposal to do low-pressure sewers or individual pump in each property. That bumps to a main line in the street, and then the street, goes all the way down. We would own the sewer all the way down to Jackson Road, but each property would own their own pump. Subsequent to that, we got a letter from the health department saying, hey, guess what? We're going to back this legislation from the DEC that no one knew about that says the town needs to own and maintain the pumps as well as the line. So our town board said, we're not owning pumps, we're not in the pump business. Went to DEC, sat with DEC, and the developer went through the conversation. They went back and said, well, if you develop an HOA as well as a sewer transportation district to control and manage the pumps, then that entity is responsible, not the town, but, oh, by the way, if that entity falls apart, guess what? It falls back to the town. So we had the conversation again with the town board, and the town board said if there's any way that this is falling back to us, again, we're not taking it. So we're not in the pump business. We've got 18 pump stations in town. That's our job, is to take care of those, not 72 individual pumps at your house and your house and your house. So the town board said, no, we're not taking it. The developer is currently revamping their plans, looking at doing gravity sewer up to a point along Plank Road, and then installing a regional pump station. And the regional pump station would either pump to Webster or to Shoecraft. That we would take. But the regional pump station needs to accommodate all of the drainage basin around that. So we won't take a pump station just for 72 homes, because then each neighborhood would have that. We say we'll take one pump station, which I call it the Kern property. I don't think it's owned by Kern anymore. The Berry property to the north, the other properties in the area. So you look at that sewer drainage basin to that.
Yep.
So they have not come back with any updated plans as of yet, but based on the town board feedback, they're going back to the drawing board, but they're going back to revise their sewer plans, and expect to come back with gravity sewers within their development, draining to that northeast corner, and then putting in a regional pump station, and that would pump to Webster or wherever, and that we would accept, and the town board said they would accept that.
So is there a chance that development does not materialize, or is it likely an inevitability?
Paul's in their court right now.
It's only gonna materialize if they can come up with the money to build a pump station and...
Yeah, they gotta work out the economics of, you're building 72 homes, you gotta put a regional pump station for X dollars. Can they work with the other property owners around that to say, hey, this benefits us all, and everybody shares in the cost of it, and
Former district.
How much does something like that cost? Ballpark.
$500,000. By the time you put in the size of it, you've got
On the pipe down
a
Plank.
building, you've got a wet well that can accommodate all of that, and then we require now, you've got to have a backup generator for all of it, so we don't have to go around and the generator comes with a gas-fired,
By itself.
natural gas.
Yeah, they put one in our neighborhood, yeah, watch the whole
Yeah,
process.
so probably 400 to 500,000-ish, so they got to obviously do their math and figure out how do they afford that. And
So if we go back to the zoning picture then, I guess I would ask, so that's the same question. I understand you've got 1 acre lots. If you moved over the higher density to the one lot below, and then brought the 1 acre over to the road here, the 9 mile?
9 miles.
9 mile, yeah.
250.
So if you brought the 1 acre over and just added the high density to the one above, is that a compromise that would work with people?
But that's 2 acre density now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that's what he's
so
saying. He's saying adjust the 1 acre line to 250,
Yep.
slide the 1 acre line over.
But
And he's also
basically extend
suggesting,
down up on the opposite side of Meyer Road to have the high
Yeah,
density.
just the high density for that one parcel, correct, yeah.
Well, I have a question about that came up last time, that, last time we talked about the fact that it's a 17 acre parcel, but that you all were planning to keep 5 acres to farm and convert 12
It's
acres.
a greenhouse business, so 5 acres in the front is where the greenhouses are.
So the 5 acres facing Route 250.
Yep.
With 12 acres, so not 17, but 12 acres.
That's not to say that
Behind
down the
that.
road, if they ever close the business down, if nobody
Right.
wants to run it anymore.
I mean, you could still
It won't be a
rezone the
greenhouse.
property to R120, R112.
And they can still
The underlying zoning, our code still allows them to operate a farm market in whatever zoning district.
That was my next question.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I didn't want to
if it is
impact the
rezoned, it doesn't
business, yeah.
impact them operating as homes as well as operating as a farm market. You know, our code allows you to have farm markets in any
Right.
residential
But
district.
that's,
have any-
but
Would that
that's
hold
your
true for the-
immediate, that's your,
Sorry, just a couple of
Wish.
conversations going.
right, to,
You're gonna be
to,
doing this for another 30 years.
that's your
or
personal
so.
desire is to keep the 5, you know, for the foreseeable future.
No, well, everybody likes us to be in business.
For the
Pardon me?
I said everybody likes our business, so it's hard for us to retire because when people come to shop, they just don't ever want us to retire. So I always feel like, we'll retire someday, but, yeah. Yes,
Sorry,
But again, you run into the problem that if you split the zoning, it's the same thing you're dealing with all these other people that we're wrestling with now. It doesn't make good sense to split zoning on property. If you're gonna do it, fine, do all of it. If you're not gonna do it, don't.
No, he's not talking about splitting their parcel.
No, he's not, but I think you're trying
No,
to
no.
rationalize keeping the 5 acres.
You're just trying to
as 5
clarify
acres.
what-
No, I'm just trying to clarify, is
Oh,
that still
I'm
the
sorry.
plan, the 5 and,
Okay.
the 5 and 12 versus the
But it-
17 as a unit?
Yeah,
Well,
but it
it's
really,
not like you're 30 years old. How many
No.
more decades are you gonna do this?
I don't know.
yeah, don't put them on the spot.
He's
So,
my age.
I mean, so my assumption is the same for the funeral home, even if the rezoning recommendation is made, as long as that's a viable business, there's not gonna be any change to that. It's only if they ever choose down the road to close it and sell it, that
Zone
rezoning
your
would go.
underlying zoning
Okay.
is what they can consider. Smart, we had
If
it.
it gets rezoned, does that have any tax implications on the business?
It does not, no,
No.
you're assessed on what you're functioning as, not what the property is zoned.
It's like when you take a home, like in the Four Corners, for instance, it was a single-family residence, but now it's zoned Four Corners, which is business. It still stays as a residence as long as you want to run it as a residence. It's taxed as a residence.
Okay.
One other question, and that's with respect to the density of the zoning, the size of the residences, the property associated with the residences. How does the school district determine how many seats they have to think about having ahead as things are developed? I mean, it's not just based on, Mike is
It's a
hopeful
good
that it
point.
would be people who are older and retired, but you can't bank on that. The school district
They've
can't
got a
bank
formula
on
that
that.
they-
So how does that work?
I mean, we have conversations with them all the time. We send them plans, we send them what stuff we see coming in.
They're trying to project their future.
They project,
Well,
but
exactly,
they've
but I'm
also got a
saying, how do
formula
they do
of,
that?
they've got formulas for that, and it's 1.2, and I'm making up numbers here, but 1.2, you
Per
know,
house.
per house, whatever, you know, they can, they've got it down to a pretty good science based on what you're building, what the market is, you know,
I think a
if
shock
it's
to them would be
apartments
like,
and.
yeah, if you built like something super, built a high rise out here,
Yeah.
and added that many, well, you wouldn't put kids in a high rise anyways, but if you built 1,000 new homes, and I'm using a random number, 1,000 new homes in the span of like, I don't know, 2 years, we were developing like we were in Texas or something, then they'd be like, oh no, we're not ready for that. But at the rate we do development around here, like
About
Mark
2%
said,
a year.
the trend that they've seen, they've studied it for years and years and years.
Per year.
And that formula Mark speaks of is what allows them to accurately project a good future for them to say, we have capacity here, we have to adjust our class sizes, we need to restructure things, we may need to do an addition on a building or construct a new school. But that's their job, you know, from 9 to 5 is to figure out, all right, how are we best serving our community? How are we going to get this done in the future and keep doing this
Well,
the way
we
we are?
chatted about it the last meeting. Obviously, whatever school you're in, 500 kids graduate every year. So you need some backfill of students to keep the school going. And you look at Fairport, and that community is aging out, and there's no new building going on. They've been laying off teachers and had declining enrollments for a number of years. So I think, you know, we've always looked at, you know, some amount of measured growth is actually good for the schools. It backfills and kind of, you know, keeps them.
Because they're still
solvent. It
paying the
keeps-
same
keeps them-
taxes they paid 10 years ago.
Keeps them going and everything
There's nobody
else.
there helping
It's
them
just,
pay it.
you know.
This parcel's in Webster, is Webster School District. right?
Yes, it is. And you were with me, I think you were with me, didn't you hear, or maybe you weren't, you didn't go to the presentation that I did you? Dr. Putnam was actually at the presentation and gave, it was kind of interesting because it hit right on what you were talking about. He was talking about how they anticipate who's coming to town for new development. He even has it broken down to what grade levels these kids will be in when they come here, based on how young the families are and all this
Their
business.
starter homes, or if they're, you know.
Yeah, it's
if they're-
really
If they're
amazing.
gonna
And
impact
then-
elementary school, if they're gonna impact, you know, come into more of a high school, I don't. obviously
Wasn't
have
the school
their plans.
district one of the drivers in not developing Shadow Pines? Because they said if we had any more, we couldn't.
School district wanted to
No,
put a building
they,
down.
you know, the thing
No, they
about
didn't
school
want- they
districts
didn't
are,
want to
they'll tell you
develop
they're having a crunch issue.
Yeah.
But remember, the school districts exist for one reason, to educate kids. That's what they want
I
to
mean,
do.
I thought they were all over the place, needing more buses, needing more schools.
No,
that was
the
what
school
they were
district,
saying.
the school district wanted the property to either put a bus garage on it or put a new school on it.
But they didn't, what they didn't want the property was single-family housing, right? Because they didn't have.
Well, they don't care.
never
The
said
school
that.
districts,
They're not- they were-
the school
Yeah.
districts don't care. They want families to come in because that helps, they get more money from the state the more
Yeah, the
families
school
they
district-
have. So it's only a win-win for them to have more families
Jim,
coming
you've been
in.
here 39 years. Has the school district ever come to us and said,
Don't build anymore.
we don't want,
No.
we've never heard
They
from the school
want
district to say, we don't want more students or we don't want more.
Because they don't want to go through what Perrington's going through. They don't want to go through what the Fairport district is going, where they're laying off teachers and they're not providing the services. They want to be able to provide an education to as many children as they possibly can. And it doesn't matter to them if they have to build a new school, because they're going to get funding from the state to do it.
And they have land
They're
already.
going to get funding for different programs, they're going to get funding for everything.
The school district owns land out on Harris Road, so they've already bought and planned for the future. They're looking at other areas all the time. They own the property on Atlantic Avenue over by Baird Road. So
And
the
they
school
own
district
property on
has already,
Penfield Road by Gloria, or by,
yeah, the school district has already bought land knowing that things are going to continue to grow and develop in the town. So they've already have land saved and acquired for future development. So Harris Road, they're out there ready, holding land, knowing that
the comment that Dr. Putnam made, which I thought was interesting, is Penfield is not creating much of a problem for the capacity for the schools right now. The big problem they're running into is Walworth, because part of the Walworth area is in Penfield Schools District, and they're exploding out there. They're the ones that are causing a little bit of the problem. So we still have to pay for it, but it's really not affecting us as Penfield residents in terms of more children.
And Chuck, if I can just clarify, so Chuck, the issue wasn't the school district that said, we don't want 225 or however many single-family homes. It was the committee of residents that were together who calculated what the tax impact was going to be of having houses of the size that were being proposed in terms of how much property tax would be generated compared to what was needed to educate that same number of students.
I passed out a lot of those brochures, and I remember bullet points, now maybe they were not true or not, but from the school district saying that they were gonna have to, buy new buses, build new schools.
we'd never.
Well, they're gonna do that anyways, and they're gonna do it for kids that don't even live in Penfield.
Right.
Because they've got Brighton kids, they've got Macedon kids, they've got Walworth kids. They're gonna do it, and eventually there will be more schools here, and it'll take a long time, but there will be
Yeah,
eventually.
but to my knowledge, the school districts, either one, Penfield or Webster, has never come to the town and says, hey, slow down, stop doing what you're doing.
We don't want any.
We don't want any more development. I don't believe that conversation has ever happened.
So, getting back to this, I think George, I think you made the comment about bringing the line over. And it might make sense to do that only because if you look at this property south of the Vendel property, where behind the Belleville Funeral Home, it does have some limitations. It's got a wetland on it. There is not a lot of developable land back there. So maybe it would be a situation where you would go to a 1 acre there, and if they wanted to use a cluster of development to do that, you still wouldn't get a lot of density on the property based on what's there. The one down here, I don't think the owners really have shown us any interest in changing the zoning. I think.
Bill, you and I
Who was it?
chatted the other day. He's a
Who was
retired
it?
farmer, and he still, I think, rents out the property.
And he may not want to change the zone. Who knows? I don't know. But he hasn't come to us yet. Who's the owner?
Gary Nagel,
Okay.
he's retired from like General Motors or something. He just likes it the way.
He wants to be a farmer,
Well,
or needs to live on a farm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just likes it.
So maybe at this point in time, if you're going to rezone, just go to 1 acre and let it stay at 1 acre. And then just below him is you got the RG&E, I think, down there. So they're not going to do anything. They don't.
Yeah, I would stop it where they said that line says RA2, I wouldn't go any farther. south.
Right,
No.
right. Just use that line as the break point.
So I guess initially, what's the group's thought of moving north of Plank, west of 250 making that 1 acre zoning.
With the exception of the,
Well, let's start with 1 acre, and then we can go to the, if we're okay with the first step, and then you can suggest your second step.
Okay.
See if- So for that block, say north of Plank, west of 250 remaining lands, is the group supportive of rezoning that?
Can you
So
just
that-
have him hover, just so we're clear on what you're talking
So
about?
the big rectangle that has Maya on the north, Plank on the south, 250 on the east, and whatever that is.
Yep. Zach, can you just,
All right, answering
On
two
the west.
can you
questions.
do an aerial around that whole block? Use the area tool just to kind of highlight that whole, just. Yeah. So if you can go around the Vendel property all the way down to Plank Road.
Down to Plank?
Well, that property's all wetlands, so they're
Yeah,
not
but if you're gonna rezone the block, rezone the block.
Yeah.
You're not gonna do anything with it, but, you know, at least if you're gonna move the 1 acre line, you move the 1 acre line, yeah, click there and then go all the way up. No, well.
Keep going all the way.
Well, you're going around LB.
Oh,
so it's
I'm
zone
sorry,
LB.
yeah.
Couple
Good point.
acres that it is.
why are you taking the LB?
No, that, you know what? That-
LB would be a
It's a
down
business.
zone
And
for
LB
them. That's
goes
the,
to the
was the Harris Seed Corporation. So LB is a
Commercial.
Light
commercial.
business.
Yeah.
So if we change it to R1, that's basically you're taking away what we've talked about earlier. You're taking away the value of the
Their value.
property.
Okay.
So they're at a higher zoning class, if you want to call it that, than currently. So is the group supportive, at least as a first step, of rezoning that area to a 1 acre?
Recognizing that the two properties on Plank Road will not be, they're not gonna be developed. That property next to the Argini is totally wetland.
So I was just pulling up earlier with Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if it were or not, and it is.
Yes.
So that's all
I got one
wetland.
yes, show of hands.
Yes.
No. What's the acreage zoning again at north of Maya?
99.1.
No, north of Maya?
Basically, it's like an R112 right now, but it's through incentive. I'm going to come back to the Vendel property, just specifically to that
Yeah,
one
because
piece.
you've included that now in this.
I'm just saying, that if the whole group is saying, let's go to 1 acre, or at least at 1 acre, and then we can talk, if we're going to talk about the Vendel-Felvo properties, do you want to go higher than that? I think there's going to be a lesser vote than there is for this piece. So I just figured we'd take it step by step and say, okay, if we go over a 1 acre, and then we can talk about the Felvo, Vendel properties, and if you want to go higher there, then I'm thinking it's going to be a subset of that original vote. So, not to say yes, all 1 acre, but just, is at least 1 acre okay with the group? I think most of this side had yeses down
Yes.
here. Yes.
Fine, but you said we'll come back to the.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. that's fine.
Chuck?
So you really only have
You're no?
three properties.
Dan?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got majority vote to at least 1 acre for that portion of it. Now let's talk about whether, I'll let you.
No, I just think that I would say for the parcel right below the Maya Drive, I would say that one because it's adjacent, I don't see that as a huge deal to go to higher density.
Okay. This was the one Michael had brought up last time, and I think you had suggested R112, kind of matching those lot
Just to
sizes
keep going south with it.
to the north of that.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
What's the group's thought on R112 for the, call it the Vendel parcel, just as show of hands?
Yes.
So I see majority 5-3. So, any interest in the Felvo, the next piece down?
No, no.
R1?
So we'll leave that as R1. So the recommendation, again.
How much is that, is wetland?
The back half.
The back half.
Put it back up. Because what I want to show is, I think what's kind of in your minds is how much new development could possibly occur on these properties if they get rezoned. So half that property, well, almost a half, you can't develop.
I think you've got to really emphasize what limitations there are to those properties,
Right.
namely in the wetlands, and what can and can't be done. Now, and that has an impact that should be taken into consideration. It's not just two-dimensional.
And that's why I'm thinking 1 acre might be more appropriate on that property, because now you're going to stay away from the wetland.
But I voted against it because we shouldn't have even included the property in question at that point for 1 acreage.
You're suggesting 2 acre? That's correct.
No. The property south of Maya should be higher density allowed.
Oh, that's what we,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what
Yeah, I
we
know,
yeah.
but initially, it was all included when,
Well, and Mark's point earlier there was like,
it shouldn't have even been, it should have been just, that's my opinion, left out. But it is what it is now.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
No, I'm saying, let's come back to that. I just knew, it
Well,
sounded
we
like,
did,
there was
but
more
then-
support at 1 acre. Now we're coming back at R112 is the...
kind of a gradual conversation.
So,
So, right now, Zach, if you can highlight the Vendel property. So,
That didn't work. There it goes.
so the Vendel property, right now, just that one piece right there, George and Michael have put out that they're supportive of an R112 zoning for that parcel.
Which is similar to the layout.
Yeah, the property in question.
Mhm.
How many are in support of that?
I thought we just voted.
We just
Yeah,
voted on
just
it.
said-
Oh, we had
Okay.
5. so.
You
You had
had
5?
That's what.
a lot of fives.
And I think I said, how about the Fellow property? Everybody said,
No.
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 okay.
so really, I mean, when you look at it, I agree with the committee. I think that those properties should stay R1. And if you looked at those properties, there's not going to be that much development compared to what you could have had if it went to R120 or something.
Because those are state wetlands. then
You're not going to be able to, that's right, you're not going to be
We
able to.
got the buffers and stuff.
That's a 100-foot buffer beyond the wetland. that
So you
they're
really
gonna
only have
also maintain.
1.5 properties for R1, and then the other one for the Vendels going to a higher density.
Okay,
Yeah, so I
so,
think we're good.
so we'll write it up as the majority of the group is supportive of, it obviously wasn't unanimous, so we'll reflect that in our,
And that's assuming that the infrastructure is in place to support it.
well, of course, I mean, that's any property we have. I mean, we've got property zone commercial, and if you have no sewer, water,
You can't use it.
You can't use it.
access to the highway, it can be all the commercial it wants to be, it just, it's a non-buildable lot. We've got several of those.
Could you guys estimate, so if we deducted the 5 acres for the farm stand area, and we assume that maybe 1/8 of that, it's sort of hard to tell, is wetland or something sensitive, with space for roads and everything else that is needed, about how many
How many units you
sort of
could get in?
townhouse units
27.
would that fit?
I think it would come down to about 27.
27.
That's what he was asking for, but he had to do it under incentive zoning to get it because it was zoned differently. And he still has to, well, he doesn't have to do it now, but he would have to have done it, and 27 was the number that came out. And I can't remember, was that including the farm market at a later date?
No. the
It
farm
wasn't.
market
No,
farm was
farm
there.
market was excluded.
So you'd probably get another 5 or 6, 7, something like that.
Okay.
The next one.
Next one was the Lupo Rubino properties.
Before we leave this area,
Here we go, we're saying.
yeah, just because I think you're gonna have to make some recommendations about other things, and one of the things that I want you to think about, we don't have to do it tonight, but I think there's been a pervasive attitude in the town on everybody's part, that everything east of Route 250, the 250 was the dividing line.
I was afraid you were going to bring that. I was like, no.
Well, I have to, I mean, it's something we have to
We
talk
talk about it every day.
And
Yeah, I know.
And it's something that I think everybody thinks that really that area should pretty much stay in an agricultural state and, not any high-density development. And I think at some point in time, if everybody agrees with that, we're gonna have to make a statement in the document somewhere to that effect, if everybody's.
I think
agreeing
the
with it.
adjacent to 250, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, there's no way around that because that's the first thing.
To the
that
east
you-
side of 250,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, the problem is that you've got set-asides, the town has purchased development rights and some of the, so you get into a whole other Pandora's box of issues once you move on the other side of 250, and then you've got a lot of established farmers that are over there, and farmland and agriculture, so I think the properties closest to 250, yes, I think that they should at least be discussed or.
Well,
I don't wanna go too
It's just
far
that we get pressure from people periodically saying, oh, I'd like to develop that first lot on the east side of 250. I don't think that anybody at this point in time really wants that to happen. I think they're trying to keep that area as rural as possible, and I just want to go through that with you to make sure that that's your mindset for that area.
Right now,
But
yes.
does that simply mean no housing, or does that?
No, it just means that there's no higher density development. I mean,
Keep
right
it
now,
R8.
most of it doesn't have access to sanitary sewer, so they're not gonna have higher density. But there are some properties, that Gilliland property for one is,
That's up,
can we go up higher?
Marshall Road.
There's a lot of interest on, no, it's further up, I think. Oh, no, I'm sorry, it is that. It's,
This one, isn't it?
I thought it was the
No,
one,
it's
that-
that
no.
one, yeah.
Which one's Gilliland?
That's it.
Getting there. Nope.
That's
two.
two.
That's right, well, his
I
is
thought it
two.
was this
His two, but
Yeah.
Gilliland's the other one north here.
No, I think you're right, Zach, that's it right
Yeah.
It's across from that.
So, there is the ability to sewer that property. But I don't think that we're in a mindset, at least from our perspective, at this point in time, that we want to see anything happening on the east side of Route 250, because if you let one do it, it's just going to be a domino effect right down the street, and I'm not certain that we want to see that happen this time.
Well,
But I think as a group, you're going to have to think about that, and we're going to have to address it somewhere in the document. It takes about
I mean,
half a Penfield.
I think the crossroads like that are so ripe because they've got the higher density across the street, I see the point that people are gonna be asking that.
They do all the time, and it's been a little problematic for us. So I think that something has to be in the
Can
document.
you scroll up a little bit higher, a little farther north?
What's that
Yeah,
about?
so you see, it's a natural progression. I mean, even if we don't address it, the next comp board is gonna address it. There's no way around it. I mean, if you
And you
continue
can
to
see,
grow,
there's
yeah.
not any development,
Getting
heavy
close to-
density, just to the north of us there.
You see, but
It is
see-
on the other side, but not here.
You're just looking at the Webster trend. of
Yeah, but
the-
I'm just saying, if you look down, okay, if you just use a little common sense, even if we say, okay, we're gonna stop, 10 years from now, you're gonna be talking about that. There's no way around that.
But that's okay.
That's
10
fine.
years,
Yeah.
That's
10 years from now is,
George.
Yeah.
you know, who knows what's gonna happen in 10 years.
How's it zoned currently? Is it agriculture?
there. All right, too.
RA2, which I think is
Residential
fine.
2-acre.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Everything beyond that's 2 acre for the rest of the town.
Yeah.
There's a question. Harold, did you have a question?
Nope.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing things.
But I'm just saying, it's a big chunk of land, and we have to address it somewhere in the document.
So are you thinking we should, I don't disagree, but I mean, what kind, I mean, if we're
Oh,
gonna
and
say our
it'll just
recommendation
be,
is leave it
you know, we talk about
Yeah.
high density, we talk about low density, and I think that when we get to low density, that's probably,
But at least the conversation was there. The committee
Yeah.
talked about it and believes it should remain 2-acre at this time, east of 250 in this area. So at least if people say, well, the committee talked about it, yeah, we had a conversation, the group said at this time.
you
we're
wanna
not
keep it
there
the way
yet.
it is.
Just leave it as it is and,
It doesn't prevent people from developing on their properties if they wanna build a 2 acre.
no, but it gives direction to the town board and the planning board as they're
Right.
looking at applications.
They also
The
have
comp
the
plan committee
request.
looked at it and at this time, they're not recommending any.
The comp plan
Change
does
from there.
act as a good tool, if we go through a lawsuit, for instance. It acts as a tool saying, well, your community said this is what you're really looking for, you're trying to do something totally different, we're not gonna, you know, we're not gonna see in your favor, we're gonna go with the town. It's happened a couple times over the last 30, 40 years, we've actually won lawsuits because of that. So it's kind of important that something's in there that talks about certain areas that, you know, we might have some pressure for.
Okay.
And I think it also gives people who are potentially interested in that land to, you know, have a nice big open space for themselves, and gives them some level of confidence if they were to purchase it.
Yeah.
That, well, at least I don't have a guarantee that the zoning will never change, but I've got sort of the community support
Yeah.
behind the fact that this is likely to be fairly wide open for a reasonable amount of time.
Roland, I saw the hand.
Yeah. No, that's fine, good conversation on residential development.
Right.
Here's what our role is looking down the line 10 more years as best we can. Other forms of agricultural development, such as issues that are going on in Farmington, in Rush, and in Caledonia with solar
Oh,
farm
yeah,
development. Might not be knocking on the door now, but it doesn't mean that it won't be.
Absolutely right.
They've knocked
So we have to have that, we gotta, okay, we hit residential, fine, we're good there. We've gotta go beyond that,
Absolutely right.
outside.
We gotta talk about
outside
that.
the box.
Yeah.
And we've gotta think about things like that too. How, what kind of a guideline we wanna have the town, set for the town that is, to put in the toolbox to use when that happens.
My brother lived in Rush up until 3 months ago, and he lived on 10 acres of land, and there's nobody around him. There's 200 acres of farmland around him. The farmer sold the land to the state of New York. Actually, the state of New York just took the land and then paid him for it. And now they're going to put in 200 acres of solar panels next to where my brother. He lives in South Carolina now.
And the conversation can just be even as much as like to encourage this town to set density, limitations of solar development per se in certain areas, or promote a study
Right.
to
Determine
develop
the most appropriate locations.
that's appropriate zoning
Yeah.
legislation.
And that's going to be part of our sustainability
That
portion
is
of
the
the
kind of thing
document.
we've got to address
Yep,
here, put
absolutely.
out to them for that. Like you would a corridor study, like you would a sewer study.
Right.
Things like in the same spirit of that. So, and that, because that's,
Well-
the east side is going to be put
Is
more
everybody
so with-
familiar with the lettuce plant that they're building, that they're proposing to build in Webster,
Yep.
right on the town line? I should bring the plans down. We'll do that maybe next time. You're talking like 50 acres of a building.
4.3 million square feet.
Yeah. That's
Greenhouse.
a
The
gigantic
greenhouse?
greenhouse.
7 giant greenhouses.
Yeah,
It's
50
big, I
acres.
mean, it's,
another
but
thing
again, it's
too
agricultural, so as we
Another
talk about some
thing
of these things
too
in broad brush and say it should remain agricultural,
is
it's still agricultural, so.
wind powered energy as well. I mean,
Yeah, I was gonna ask
I
you.
got notes on that too.
It's not so much
Yeah.
here as it may be more of a lakeshore community, but I had to research that legislation once, and if all the towns in the region that I thought had the best on that was Cohocton. But
And
think
look what
about
happened
it.
to Cohocton.
Think about it when you go down
Yeah.
390 South.
50, 60, 70 of them right next to each other.
Yeah. So those are the things that are gonna be looking at the open space of agricultural lands. It's already in the news already, like I said, so
Yep.
Well, it's,
best talk about that too.
we've talked about that definition of agriculture, how it continues to change, whether you're a farmer or whether you're trying to do a
So my
solar-
question is
solar
that-
farm.
We should discuss to make recommendations, but ultimately, the state defines what agriculture means and what's allowable, right? We tie to what the
It's
state
true,
does,
but
right?
it's just like Roland says, you gotta kind of be a little bit aware of what agricultural is.
But
Because you might-
again, I don't disagree, but
But we can set legislation for density and,
Buffer areas and.
yeah, exactly.
Because our code doesn't talk about it right now, and that's the issue.
And
That's
that's-
something we've been
that was gonna be my next
And that's
question, is
the
if we
point
cover
of
that in the
this
code at
committee,
all, and I
is
don't
what
think
the
we do.
code should be
necessarily.
thinking about talking.
All right.
I mean, we tried to buffer ours away from Jackson Road, but we're not that successful. You still see it when you drive by. This property here on Route 250, it's a perfect site for that because it's flat as a pancake and it's open. It'd be the worst place in the world to put it there because you'd see it from everywhere. I mean,
Do people have a problem with seeing solar panels?
well, I mean, if you've got the
If you
ability to
live
buffer
next door to
it,
it,
I mean,
yeah.
you should buffer it so that you don't have to look at 5,000 solar panels. They're gonna build 200 acres of solar panels down in Rush. I mean, that's
The
pretty
public
intrusive.
perception a lot of times is a black solar field is the same as a black parking lot.
Yeah,
Both-
people.
They're
people
both
do.
black, right?
But if it's buffered, I mean,
There's
zoom
not
in
much
on
to look
the,
at.
The 500
Glory
cows.
landfill and.
Okay.
I'm just telling.
Certainly, we had to look at
Glory
that.
Drive
I'm saying.
landfill might be a nice location for it because it's kind of buffered.
Well, I'm saying,
I think
how many
that-
people know we have
They
4
have one
acres
there.
of solar panels on Glory Drive
Yeah.
currently?
I mean, I think if the zoning recommendations have the buffers built in, I think that's the right approach, and the
I
density
mean,
conversation.
As it comes to
it's
it,
like
and nobody even knows
a
this is out
percentage
there and. you know.
per acreage.
Yeah, that's what I.
Yeah, is another means. Type of agriculture that is developed around the panel bases. It's another means. I've seen it in other community agricultural protection plans.
Mike, I guess what I'm saying is,
But,
I wouldn't want to throw them next to your house, and I wouldn't want to throw them next to my house. If there's a place for them, and there's certainly a good place for them in Penfield, but I don't think it should be abutting
Well, I think as Roland shared.
Well, they are next to my house. I mean, they back up to Newbury Park. I see
Well,
them every single day.
Yeah, but I mean,
And I think it's great. I love it.
Well-
Clean energy. That's what we want.
well, we certainly do, but I would have liked to have buffered them better for you.
I mean, I
That's
think
what
at
I'm
least
saying.
there, it's kind of, we'll say in a hole, but it's, you got berms around it and you've got other buffers in place.
It's not slapping you in the face, but
Yeah,
it's,
here
you
on,
can see it, but it's
here on
not
Glory
obnoxious.
Drive, it's kind of tucked in and there's berms around it, there's
Yeah.
other stuff, and, you know, I mean, this is the county's facility, but, you know, I think if there's proper buffers left around it, or berming, or other things, you're not gonna hide it and
Yeah, I mean,
make it go
I
away.
think if
but-
you go through the conversation and we make the recommendations for the type of buffering that would be.
Yeah.
you know,
We're gonna have that
and-
discussion, because we're gonna
Yes.
talk about sustainability, and that's gonna be.
Because, I mean, ultimately, this also goes back to the fact is that you can't put the folks that have agriculture land in a position that they can't use it.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, I mean, that we can't forget the fact that there are other
And
considerations
the
there.
fact that we're losing farmers, I mean, we don't have as many farmers as we did have, and eventually, we're not gonna have farmers, so,
But the issue is how to manage it.
that's right.
And I think that's the thing, is that there's a balance
That's
between
all,
the two,
that's
yeah.
all I'm saying is.
Yeah, no, you're right.
As a reminder.
And quite honestly, you know, I'm not knowledgeable enough about solar or wind. That would definitely be if somebody could, you know, I'm gonna do a little research, but if there's someone that could talk to us a little bit about, in more detail, what some other communities are doing, would be very beneficial when we get to that section.
We will make sure that happens.
Isn't that in the town code now? About,
We
We
solar?
have, we have individual solar panels on your house. We
right,
have a
but isn't there
back
something in that says you can't generate? We haven't thinking about it.
No, I mean, if you wanted to say you wanted to put in 10 solar panels on your property, as long as you met your
We
setback
don't have anything
requirements?
for a
Well-
solar farm.
No.
Yeah, there's nothing about large-scale
Yeah,
solar
I see.
farms
No,
in
you
the
can't.
code, no.
Yeah.
No, you cannot just.
Currently,
open up
today,
a
our
farm.
code doesn't allow it. We know it's gonna be a eventuality, so as Roland shared, we need to.
But maybe that's something
around it.
that you address in the building code rather than.
It will, but I mean,
zoning.
it's good to have recommendations out of the comp plan committee to say, yes, we're supportive of green energy, we're supportive of new technologies, we're supportive of these items, given proper buffering, management, size limitations, whatever. So we may not have the specifics out of it. Staff and others will will work on that, but,
But
you know, that's a recommendation that can come out of the group, is we're supportive of these elements going forward with these caveats, similar to we've had on other things, and, you know, proper management of it.
I just would like to, before we sort of get further lost in the weeds
Yeah,
on this particular
exactly.
one, I just think we have a somewhat bigger issue that we have to remember to frame, and that's definitions associated with every form of open space.
Yeah, we talked about it.
And so I just want to kind of
Tim
remember
Murphy
to
made
have
that
everybody kind of
statement.
keep that one tucked in the back of your head, that we've got a lot of different ways to think about open space, agriculture, recreation, sanctuary, wetland, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So,
We're gonna consider that as we start drafting the document. It's
Yeah,
been talked
yeah.
about several times.
but I mean, so I don't think we have to worry about, is it agriculture, is it not?
Right.
We got bigger fish to fry in terms of open space.
Right. So, as you know, let's get back out of the weeds and back onto the road.
Okay.
So we will have that sustainability section that we will talk to, and we will bring people in to talk about all sorts of alternative energies.
Yeah, it would be nice to talk to somebody from a municipality that's done it, if that's possible, that could make some recommendations.
Well, it turns out one of our leaders in the community, Bob Knauer, is heavily involved in this stuff, so we could bring him in and have him talk to you as well.
And-
But we
and-
want to talk about geothermal, we want to talk about solar,
Exactly, yeah.
wind, the whole bit.
So the whole
All right.
sustainability, yep, yep.
We'll do some nuclear
Throw
too.
nuclear in there while we're at it.
All right, are we good with the ones that we've talked about here? All right,
Always the smart
you guys
I gotta do
there?
something, come
All
on.
right. All right,
We're all
let's
thinking,
get on. Let's get on.
already there.
Yeah, let's talk about the Rubino property. I'll let you jump in on that one.
I think we actually only got the request from the Lupo property, which is the one on the north side. It's currently zoned 1 acre.
That's correct.
It's kind of, let's say it's awkward. I mean, they're currently under review by the planning board right now
Well,
at current zoning.
they've gone through it, they haven't really come back with an
I say they've
application.
gone to-
They're halfway through.
Yeah, they've gotten a preliminary approval for it, but they asked for higher density for the Lupo property. But if you're looking at the Lupo property, we ought to talk about the Rubino property to the south.
This is like in a situation if this current application went away, and there's a future developer later on that came back with something different.
Yeah.
And while you're doing that though, look at the area around it. look at the development that's occurred already. Now, we'll come back in again, because you can see on the west side of Jackson Road, those are already developed lots. Many of them have deed restrictions on them against any future subdivision.
Yeah, 5
Well, those
acres.
are all 5 acre, it's a little beyond the 1 acre.
But they did have deed restrictions on them, so they're kind of
This is
stuck
an example of a 1 acre development,
as a conventional layout.
yes.
And he marketed it pretty well. I think he's got one lot left that he has to market, or two maybe.
No, just this one
I think
here.
gonna
He
be the
sold,
one in the
well, he
back
sold
there.
the other one, they're
They're
just waiting to build their
Alright.
house.
So it's kind of different than what you were looking at a few minutes ago with Abington and a couple of the others that had, higher density around it. This is kind of got low density around it now. And as Mark mentioned, Mr. Lupo was the one who asked for it. And even asked for it after they had made their movement to start working with the planning board to come in for a development. So I think he was just taking a shot to see what he could get.
And as we've followed anybody that's asked for it, we've talked about it in the group, just to
Right.
make sure they've had their due, we've
Can
had
you
the
scroll up
conversation.
just a little bit? Thank you.
And that's the Berry property. You see they have signs out for turkeys and
Yeah. Zach,
just
could
to
you,
orient you where,
could you draw the line around the property in question again? Is it two properties, 1394 and 1440 Jackson Road?
It's those two right there where he's
Okay,
crossing
there,
back and
okay,
forth.
gotcha.
so the Lupo one is the one where Zach has the arrow on it, that's the
And
one,
one
that's the
below
one
it is-
request. The two properties, the Rubino's one is also as part of this current application.
Subdivision.
Oh, okay.
Are those Webster schools?
Do you have one?
No, it's Penfield schools.
Yes, they do have a layout.
Total, so they're talking about high density, and what's the unit total?
Right now,
There's like
their
a
application is
chunk in it
based on
like part
current
of it.
zoning.
Okay.
So they're proposing
72.
72
That's what-
units,
That makes
I mean,
sense. That's what's
it's
Yeah,
a
right.
1 acre zoning district, they're doing town law 278, so the cluster, so not all lots make
With
them up being
with the set aside, yeah.
72
Oh, yeah, there's
units,
that
but, or it's not every lot, maybe 1 acre, but they don't get
I
any
know
more
that
units
there was
than
a
what.
section where it just went way north and.
Well, this
came
one's a
right
lot
back
easier
down.
for me than the last one, so.
It's crazy.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is what the planning board reviewed and granted a preliminary approval for the subdivision layout. They,
This is turned sideways, so if you
Yep,
look
got
at
it.
it,
Right.
Plank's here, Jackson's here, just to turn your head.
So it looks like a lot of density, but that's what they're allowed to have
But
on
that's
a
the
1 acre
72
zoning
units?
district.
this
Yes.
is how they
Okay.
distribute.
So you can see how much green space is left over on the corner, they're not even touching the corner
Staying out of
property.
the wet area, they're leaving this as
Right.
a large lot to sell off to somebody else.
And
Well, and even on the back area, they're showing a conservation easement to preserve the trees. It's just that,
They were
as the
actually-
town, we don't want to own
Backyards.
odd little strips between
Right.
people's backyards. It's a policing issue for us forever, because people just, well, it's town land, I'll go in there and throw my leaves in there, I'll
Yeah.
trim a few trees, next thing, it's a shed back there, and it
Throw
just
my
becomes
neighbor.
a huge policing issue for us. We'd rather put it in a conservation easement, let them own it, let it stay on the tax rolls, than us to own, what's that little strip value to the town? It's not a future park, it's not a budding
Can
thing
you
of
go
the town
back to
land.
the, yeah.
so that's between like 90 and 100 acres, right? That
Probably, yeah. Can you get
I thought it
those?
It was less.
Can you hit that?
80 something.
Hit the,
80
yeah.
something.
Yep, and gets loaded on the side of the day.
it is.
So we have, this hasn't been voted on before.
57, so.
Yeah, they're pretty close, 90 acres.
90.
Okay.
Did you, I just hasn't even
Did
talked
you
about
get-
it before.
We did.
We started conversation at the last meeting about it, and we got to the end, and I don't think we came up to any
We didn't.
No.
deciding factor, and we just, everybody kind of got scared.
Would the planning board's already approved it, or what
No.
stages is it?
It's kind of halfway through its process, so the sewer issue came up, so they've gotten preliminary approval for the 72 homes, and then the low-pressure
Oh, this
sewer.
was the sewer pump.
This is the
little-
sewer.
Right. This is the one we're talking
So what do they need us,
Sewer issue came up.
what do they need us to do?
The request came in before their project really had any feet, before it really got moving with the 72 lots, and before we even saw a sketch plan for it. But as Mark said, it was a request that we got, and as I tried to cue it up before with Mark, if that project went away for 72 units, so it just died, right? And because again, sewer's not there, they couldn't justify the cost, but maybe down the road one day a sewer shows up there, and this request was there, do we look at changing the zoning on this corner property?
Based on what's around it, what is it
They
now?
asked for a higher one, which would be the next one up is R120.
They're 1 acre.
no.
No. Not based on what's around it now, and,
And you noticed the buffer around it that they proposed because of the 278, they had a big buffer around it, which kind of buffers them from the rest of the higher density, or lower density.
Yeah.
Is that the consensus of the group?
I mean, I'll vote when somebody puts it up.
So leave it as 1 acre?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Is we good?
Unanimous vote, that was easy.
I'm sure you. All right, so we're done with page 1, and that kind of brings us to tonight, and now we're back online. So on our second page that we had was Ellen's Creek. These are kind of a couple of easy ones for you, so we'll give you a break for a minute. So we go to Ellen's Creek
Define
Valley.
easy.
This is a formality, dude.
This really is. This is a situation where back in the day, we had not yet created a townhouse development district. And Ellen's Creek Valley came in, and they wanted to build townhouses. So the only thing we had to use as a zoning district was the MR district. So they've been there now for 30, 35 years, something like that, under the zoning for MR versus TH. So we're making a recommendation, this is an administrative recommendation, that it goes to TH just because they're townhouses. So I don't think there's a big problem. The same thing is true, the next one is Sable Oaks Lane there, 14 townhouses. It's almost like we should rezone where that roadway is to townhouse development, and then MR is on the other side because that's where Elson Heights apartment buildings are. So, and what it does is, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're going to get a mortgage and the zoning's different than what the actual use is, banks have a real tough time reconciling how to give a mortgage for something that's in a residential zone that's not the same type of residential use that's in there.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's the weirdest thing ever. I had that problem on Empire Boulevard. The guy that owned the carpet cleaning operation up there, Jaeger, he wanted to sell after 45 years. The property is zoned limited business, which is a permitted use, but he also lived there and he wanted to sell it as a living unit as well as a business. He could not get a bank to give him a mortgage for a living unit in a commercial zoning district. I couldn't understand what the big deal was, but it took him years to get it, and he finally did, so he's gone now. But so it is kind of important that these uses are consistent with what the zoning requires.
That's
So
fine.
is everybody comfortable?
Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The other one we should have talked about when we were over there again.
Yeah, 1468.
It's the property.
that little
next to
house?
it. Yeah, that's all it
Yeah.
is.
We talked about that last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we threw that one in with the
You
other one.
did
I
talk
thought.
about it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you all agreed that it should be consistent with whatever happens to the one next to
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
that was the recommendation was LB, and we put that one with the
Yeah.
Yes.
bigger parcel.
All right.
You stay in the neighborhood?
Yeah, let's stay in the neighborhood. This is kind of a tricky one, and I'm kind of personally torn as to whether we should do it or not, but over the years, I've kind of watched this area here on Plank Road between Empire Boulevard and Creek Street. As you can see, some of it is already zone limited business. They took some old houses and they tore them down, so you got a bank there. You've got, I think there's a multifamily dwelling unit at 495 here.
I know that area really well.
And it's been problematic for the people that live there because if you've been down there during a PM peak period, people trying to get through there, it backs all the way up. Initially, I was thinking that maybe it should get rezoned because the houses were starting to look a little worn. But then I'm going by in the summertime and I'm looking at it again, people are taking fairly good care of their properties again. So I don't know if we're helping them or hurting them by...
A lot have sold in the recent years where they got new owners there.
And nobody's, I mean, there is one gentleman who I mentioned this to as a side note one time. He said, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we could do that. But nobody's come out of the woodwork to say, yeah, I want my property rezoned, you gotta absolutely do it. Nobody's done that. I guess I would just leave it to you as a group.
I would say leave it alone.
Yeah, if you have no request, but what's right above it, see yeah.
That's GNR, it's a Spring Pines office park.
It is private
Yeah.
property if they're not requesting it, let it be.
They're not requesting.
No, and the other thing is, you were talking about having affordable housing. It's going to be more affordable housing if it's on a kind of a busy
It
street
is.
like that.
You're right.
And if the properties aren't.
Might be a
And so-
starter home for somebody.
And nobody's
And that,
complaining about it. I just-
on the corner there, that's the schoolhouse thing
That's
right
right,
there.
that's right, Dayton's Corner School.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to run it past you, and as I say, I could go either way with it personally.
So.
I think you make a good point. I think it might be a nice starter room for you.
So I'm gonna throw something else out here, just because we're supposed to be looking at where we might make recommendations for mixed use.
Yeah,
This might be, might qualify for that, based on the infrastructure and the roads that are right there, and, you know, the amenities that are close.
well, it's a good point, but as I say, nobody's really beaten down our
Oh,
doors.
no,
to say-
no one's asked for it, but you guys did tell us on the front end, hey, we need to be considering where we would make other mixed-use recommendations. Would this qualify as one of those areas?
The only problem you run into in a situation like this is if somebody like it halfway through, just point the pointer halfway in there somewhere, it gets rezoned to mixed use or whatever zoning, and they go in and they put in a store or a restaurant or something, and the others decide they don't want to leave yet, but now you've started to create an impact to the ones around you.
Yeah.
you
Their
know?
property values.
Okay, no, good point.
Thinking outside the box, though, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I keep doing
But
that.
these are older
Ask the
homes that
question.
probably sell for less money. If somebody
Right.
wants to move into Penfield and put some sweat equity into it,
It's a good start
that would be a
for
place
them.
to
It's a
start.
good entry point to get into the town and
Do
Well,
some
it's funny,
sweat
they-
equity and build up what you've got, and potentially then you look for something else. I would leave it alone.
You're right, Daytona was like that for a long time because it was a cut-through street at one time.
now that
Everybody used to go that way.
cul-de-sac, that street's really thrived.
And now, it was a good starter place for people to go to, and now all of a sudden it's become kind of
It's
a
very desirable.
desirable spot, so. All right, that's a good comment and a good recommendation. Leave it at that. Jumping down, okay, we gotta go to Pembroke and 250.
We drove this one as we went down
Yeah.
to
Yep, I
Pembroke
remember.
and pulled in and parked in the daycare parking lot and kind of looked across the street. And what kind of sparked this initially is, Jim, I don't mean to jump in front
Yeah,
of this
please
one.
do.
Is the intersection of Pembroke Drive. That's about the only location in there, if we ever get a traffic light, is gonna be that intersection.
Pulling out of there saw. Sure does.
So part of, we've taken through LUAMP as our land use and access management program. Through that, we've collected monies from Elderwood, which is now Heathwood, through Spring
All the development.
Parks,
Oh,
into a fund. So we've got monies waiting to put in a traffic light. We just haven't met the warrants out yet.
I was gonna say, do you guys even get to decide, or is it
We
the
don't.
No.
state?
We don't. It's
we get to
gotta,
save the money.
it's gotta meet the warrants.
Right.
But one of the things that may either help the warrants or help the plaza to the west side or get access in there is a traffic light at Pembroke.
Yep.
So if you look at a traffic light at Pembroke, you're gonna want the other fourth leg that would then come in through Sarah Jane's and connect down through there. So that's where we've looked at, would you rezone 2039 and then 2033 up through there? Because right now they're single-family residential. So if you put another leg on that end coming out,
Can you
Here.
point that out, Mark?
yep, so right here's the intersection. So if we have an intersection come across this way, now you connect in and come through
Okay.
The house
here
is
and then
gone.
have a leg with it or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
else.
yeah.
We bought this property, which was the Filkins property, 2055, so this is now, was a single-family house up here, now is incorporated into Harris Whalen Park, so we've bought
And
that.
it would not be
through the last
unrealistic for a developer to come in and buy the big
Open space
parcel
piece.
and then buy the one next to it to accommodate for that access road. So,
So
certainly the house would have to go
What we've
away.
looked at is it makes sense that those are buffered from the back, would you rezone that
As I
to
said, it would give you
an
this
MR or a
connection.
townhouse or something else, that then once you get a traffic light there, now you come through that, and then you could have access into the plaza.
Yeah, but you know what?
Have the owners approached you guys to change it?
The owner of 2039 has, yes. They came to us years ago and wanted that
We said no.
rezoned, and we said no at that time.
But the problem you run into is, I don't think you can do I initially thought we could, but to run a townhouse project in there and then run a road like that through that townhouse project to get to Sarah Jane's, I don't think that that's realistic.
So
I think you'd have to
what's
go commercial.
2051 zoned as?
Limited business. So that's the
That's the
gymnastics.
gymnastics training
that's-
center.
So, I mean, I'd almost say that if you're talking about leveraging the access via the road,
Continue that.
I would just continue that up through two,
Or-
at least two, you know. and,
I mean, you could go B&R or something like that, which is a business non-retail, you could do,
I mean, but then you start slicing, I mean, I would just, you've
I think
already
you have
got,
to do
you've
all the
already got the
houses
zone
to
to
do
this
it.
20, I would just go
What-
up.
Jim, what were you saying?
I'd say if you do 2039 and then 2033, you gotta do the rest of the houses. It's gonna be a domino
This
effect.
block.
You can't put a
Yeah.
restaurant next to 2029 and give them any quality of life after what they've had there with a house next to them for all these years. you'd have to do some kind of, maybe business non-retail or something that's kind of a low intensive use, so you don't have another restaurant.
So
row or
what's the
something.
difference again between limited business and business?
Limited business allows for retail sales, BNR only
Does
allows
not,
for
yeah, that's
office,
right.
banks, that kind of
So
thing.
Kicks into restaurants and kicks
They
into
close at 6
other-
o'clock at night and you're gone.
Yeah.
But you know,
So
across
What's
the street you
across
got
the,
Elderwood.
yeah, what Elderwood's,
Well,
right?
it's Heathwood now, but it was
Yeah.
all Elderwood. And then you got those 3 units.
It's a retirement, senior living facility. They
Memory
added on a
care.
memory care. So that's more of a
Independent.
commercial, we look at it
It's
as,
commercial.
it's residential, but it's a commercial
Yeah, then
operation.
I would say putting retail there would not be, I would agree with what Jim said.
And that's
then.
right, you know, whether at a B&R or something else, but
Limited
if we can get a
business.
traffic light at Pembroke, that, we're looking at, that could give us gapping down through there. Now, the light changes, you've got potential to get out of the other plazas and the other areas from the side.
Yeah.
We've heard from Sarah Jane for years, she wants a traffic light at the exit coming out of what
For
ESL and
right.
everything else. We're never gonna get it there, it's not, the state's not to
The warrants
provide.
would never
The
be.
only chance we have is at Pembroke, and we put, you see our little traffic counters out there, we've gotta show them the warrants are there. You've got the number of turning movements, you either have accidents, you've got the volume of cars, you've got queuing.
I totaled my
so
car there 2 years ago.
You added to our help.
There you go.
So, well, how large
sacrificed
is,
myself
how
for it.
large is the 2039 property? How many acres?
1.6.
Oh, it's only 1.6
It's
acres.
not a big parcel. The other ones are all
Looks
half
a lot
acre
bigger on the
parcels.
map.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, if you were to cut a roadway through there, what else would there be room for?
Oh, they could do.
I mean,
One-
Look at the size of Sarah Jane's building.
you're talking about using this space up here.
Yeah, it would be part of their, there would
You
be
still
part of their
have-
parking lot.
It's just, unfortunately,
Gotcha.
2039 isn't directly across the intersection, so 2033 would have to be included.
Have to
And
go.
if you're gonna
Right.
rezone it, that one's gotta
Yeah,
go,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
if you rezone that
Yeah.
one,
Rezone the
And
rest
you do
of
have
it.
a
Do
request
the
for
other-
the
do the
order
other
2039 to rezone.
yes.
Okay.
Isn't something else going in next to the
Well, if you
gymnastics
remember-
center too?
There is approval that's still out there for, it was a mattress store way back when in that part of the plaza that was
He hasn't
Louis
come back.
Louis Ribero's property.
He got the approval but never did it.
Comes
He'd have to
back.
come back. He might have to come back.
No, he built the
Oh, he
parking in the
built,
back.
That's right, yeah.
So,
He could
Those
go.
homeowners want to stay there. Sewers on the street?
yes, we just actually put sidewalks in a few years ago along that portion to kind of help the residences in that area get access to the park.
Yeah.
Especially with the Filkins property, we put a little turn off in there, there's access, park access off that, so we installed sidewalks all the way down from Baird down to kind of help those residents along.
So if you were to rezone the little house there, the
33.
2033, is that the person, Sarah Jane, that you're talking about?
No.
No, okay, so that's.
No,
a
she's to
different-
the south of that.
She's to the
That's
south.
her building
She's
right
right
there.
Okay, gotcha.
And
So,
just for reference, like, that's a 25,000 square foot building, or
Okay.
22,000 square foot building.
so who would be buying how, I mean, if that house would have to come down to accommodate the road, how, do you take it by eminent domain? How
No,
does
I think the
that happen?
developer would go to them and say, because
picking up both
the developer
properties.
would come to us and say, hey, we want to build 2039, and we would say, we want an access road down through there.
Yeah,
So one of two things would happen. He would build the access road to that property line in anticipation of the future, somebody else buying that property
yeah,
and then redeveloping it, or he would go in and buy the property for that project
okay.
and incorporate it into his property.
But the owner would not be required of.
The owner has to do
No,
nothing.
no,
The
that's
owner,
the phase
the only thing the
part
owner has to do
Jim
is
talked
sell the house to
Take
somebody.
more money.
Yeah, exactly.
But obviously, anybody coming at that intersection would be interested in having access to a traffic light.
Yeah.
If it met the warrants at that point in time, they'd want to be across from Pembroke Drive.
Yeah.
So that would make that a valuable location for future development, to be across from Pembroke. Hopefully have a traffic light at some point in time, and now you have access in, and then you could get into the rest of the plaza and have connectivity through the rest of that area. I guess the question is, what do you rezone it to? Originally, we thought, do you do MR or TH or something?
I thought of that
for some
initially, and we
properties?
talked about that in the vehicle that night when we went out and looked at it, but I just can't see putting a roadway in front of a townhouse project. I mean, it's just not fair to the people that are living
I mean,
there.
those
That's gonna be constant
sizes are
traffic.
probably similar to what you've got eyesight and other stuff on the other side. You've got, B&R with a driveway behind it.
Well, it
You've got
wouldn't be
eyesight,
horrible if
you've
that
got-
were limited business as well, because you gotta generate enough money to be able
Yeah,
to
but I mean,
build it. And then
they could
the rest of
combine-
them could go all
they
business.
could combine
business
two parcels
only.
Yeah, I
together
mean,
and-
if the parcel behind it, the 2005, were still on the board, that would change
Right.
the recommendation.
Right.
But because you're talking about, in essence, what, 3 acres of single-family homes today, I mean, limited business would be, or
B&R.
B&R would be the most logical recommendation.
And it kind of blends in with the transition to the neighborhood.
And I say we
anymore.
own 2005, so that's the buffer, well, it is the park now, but you don't have to worry about impacting anybody behind that or impacting the park itself.
Yeah.
So.
It's the only way we're ever gonna get access to the
Do we
Pembroke.
land on BNR for all those properties on the west, or like an LB for 2039 and BNR for the rest?
I think you should just do one block and do them all the same.
A lot of conversation.
What do you think?
I think I would never live there.
That's why we're talking about it.
Well, that's why we're
That's
trying
why
to.
we're talking about it.
That's why we're trying to afford these people an opportunity to,
Yeah.
hopefully they can sell their property for,
Can you go down to?
But only one out of the
Penfield
9
Road?
homeowners has approached you guys.
You know, it's a good point, and you wouldn't live there, and this is what we did down on Penfield Road across from the
Right.
We took those old houses. But you can see what's happening though. You've got offices like Eyesight and the
Urgent
bank,
care.
Urgent Care.
Orthodontist.
They eat up 2 or 3 parcels, but they all still need variances because we're putting them in a position now, we're creating the hardship by rezoning half-acre lots into business that they're not gonna be able to utilize existing building. I mean, they're gonna wanna build something bigger.
Oh, I see.
But it's worked out fairly well, actually.
Yeah,
I'd
so
say
you
you had
see
to
the
buy the
businesses have
property next
definitely
door.
come in there. Have you guys already talked about the,
the rear access drives. That
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
you see similar sized lots with a
Still
rear
gotta go
access
through
drive
those
that's
2 lots.
required behind it. So that would be a condition of rezoning, is you need to install your portion of the road. 2100,
Yep.
middle of the block. Right now, it seems to walk all the way over 2100. That's U dental. So if you go by, it's
yeah, I've seen it.
yellowish building or whatever. They had to install their portion over the drive in the back. So right now, the road doesn't go anywhere, but as 2104 drops and the other ones go down, eventually now you've got access through the rear to Harris Whalen Drive. and
Dr.
then
Rengen did the
You
same
know,
thing.
you close out the front ones and.
you close out the front ones,
reduce
and
the.
now you've got a
yeah.
traffic light on the corner, you limit curb cuts along the front, so it takes time, and we don't eminent domain anything.
So
As they
theoretically.
turn over, you limit curb cuts onto the road, and you do something
And so
similar
you,
to
the
50,
the
you
thought
limit curb
process
cuts.
is that this would be the same progression here?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be a caveat of it, is if we rezone you, you need to install your portion of the access drive through your property. So you go from Harold's property to Daniel's property, you install it, Daniel hasn't sold yet, but then when he does, he installs the next piece down, so each person
So
pays for their
just to ask
portion.
one more question, because it's gonna come up now. If you do that with these 6 properties, 7 properties, and you've got the Elderwoods across the street, and so talk to me just about what's above. So you've
more
got
houses.
Those are 3
You
houses,
got 3 houses,
and then what's behind?
the park.
Is there, no, this is
Oh, this one?
Elderwood's property back here.
They had a future plan for like independent
Yeah.
cottages, once upon a time, that you could live there.
And it's zoned,
Is that
It's on
current with their
MR.
expansion
It's
too?
on MR.
Which is similar
Is
to
that
what
current
they're
with their
already
expansion?
Their current expansion was a memory care
Yeah,
unit.
that's current with
North,
that
yeah.
picture.
Yes, that
Okay,
shows
yeah.
they originally came in for kind of a
well, the reason I'm
independent
asking,
little patio homes in there. You could live there, you could have access to the main Elderwood building, you could live on your own, but people came in and checked on you, make sure you took your meds, make sure, if you needed laundry or something like that, but you could still have your own house with
Perfect, I could live there.
a garage and,
I'm surprised
They even
that
cut the grass.
they didn't snap up those 3 houses that are right, that makes so weird. that
and they may, I
Aren't you
think
tired of
they've,
working on your house?
they're still
Yeah.
I'm so tired of it.
working on what's the next phase.
But they're not, so that zoning would not be in line with the rest of their property. They would have to be
Not
rezoned at that
They'd have
time.
to come in and ask to be zoned MR.
That was the reason I was asking the question. If we're looking at these to zone them, does it make sense to just rezone these 3 so that they're ready, or at least recommend that they're ready?
Well, you gotta be a little bit careful, because now you got 2004 is now right next to...
No, I get it, I'm just saying, if you, I'm just,
That's what
if you're looking at it,
Oh,
you've got three greens
what you always-
almost around by
Yeah,
pink,
yeah.
so.
You always
Good
run
point.
into is where do you stop? I mean, you keep rezoning and somebody's the buffer and somebody's the
Somebody's gonna do it at
transition.
the end of it.
Yeah, because the other homes have big pieces of property buffering them.
Yeah.
The 46, whatever, but you're right, that one right there is.
And the housing stock is not that great. It's kind of worn, the three lots, they're not in the best shape.
Well, that's even another reason for why you might want to consider rezoning them, because that might incentivize them
Clean it
to,
up,
yeah, clean it
Yeah,
up.
good point.
My cousin's there in 2012.
All right.
And my nephew, Denzel.
Would they, you think they'd like to get their property rezoned to higher use?
So,
Did you say the
what's that?
tenants to live there for the rest of his life?
Yeah, my family.
Will they?
We don't leave. We kind of like hand it off from one family.
Well,
to
would it be,
another.
in their minds, would it be to their advantage to do
You know,
like
I
a?
don't know. Oh, I can find
I
out.
mean, if you can get a better and higher use for it,
I
they
mean, on
could,
that side would be MR, so you
So
could,
it does
you
increase.
could potentially
they might be able to build
do
another unit on the site and,
you could do a two-family or you could have a
It is
duplex
a
or
good
something
point.
on the
I mean,
property instead of a...
it gives them some protection down the line, not to just be a single family. And it gives them the ability at some point in time to build something else on the property to
Well,
enhance
especially
their...
if there's stuff going behind, who knows?
Right.
You know?
That's a good point, George. We didn't even think about the 3 lots.
But I'm looking at, because as soon as he scrolled up, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute, you know. So,
And it might
but
be,
I think before we talk about those 3, can we have the question of the ones across the street, so we can kind of put it on the table, vote on it, and then.
thank you.
I guess I'm confused, if nobody's approaching you to do it, why are we?
Because we eventually have to get a light at that intersection, and we can't get...
But the largest property owner at the bottom.
We have been approached by 2039.
Yep.
And 2039 unfortunately is not wholly across from the traffic light. So if 2039 was straight across from the traffic light, you could say just rezone that one parcel.
Yeah.
So you'd have to rezone 2033 if you rezone 2039,
Yeah, you
because
can't
by the
throw
time you do the aprons for the intersection and
Taking
the turning
over
radiuses and
playground.
everything else, you gotta do both parcels. So we said, once we do both parcels, why leave the other 4 as they are now right next to a traffic light?
Wasn't
that's
there a
what's been-
process that somebody comes in and wants to change their zoning? I mean,
Typically, the town board, I mean, if you're in the middle of the 10-year cycle, they may entertain it. Right now, they've basically told anybody that asked about rezoning their property, the comp plan's currently under
We're
review.
not doing it until the committee...
Go talk to the comp plan. So
and they haven't, right?
that group to the north has not contacted us now. 2039 has.
But they maybe they don't know exactly about this
No, they don't.
idea of
They
extending the road,
don't.
so they're in the dark.
Right.
So that's why I would guess that's why they're not.
So question, we rezone, they choose to live there for the next 20 years. There's nothing happens, there's no changes, we
And we
just
still- we
rezoned
would
it,
still
so if
have-
they want to,
We would still have to approach all of them too. You know, this is only a recommendation. If it goes through,
You're just doing what you think is best for the
we'll
neighborhood.
still have to
You
go
recommend it, the
past
town board could say, no, the neighbors don't want it, or, obviously this is a recommendation to
We
go
went to
forward.
the same-
Before the town board's not
So
gonna
it's-
rezone somebody's property and say, hey, guess what, we're rezoning your property, whether you like it or not. Typically, they like to have the people in agreement to say, yes, I'm
And we don't want to go
supportive
see people about rezoning their property if you're not going to make a recommendation to do it.
And, just
I mean, so,
just to keep.
for me, it just, based on the way it's structured and what's going on around there, and the traffic light, it makes sense to put the recommendation through, but
And here's another example of where we did it. We did another example of it down here on 250, south of Jeremiah's. These properties were also rezoned in a similar fashion.
And they came to the town board with a petition.
Exactly.
They
After
basically
they were
held to the
approached.
last comp plan, the comp plan looked at it and
Nothing's been developed there under it. We did have one person look at a law firm there. They just picked the too small a
I
property.
think
Oops, sorry, lost it.
2316.
Yep,
They took
that's
the
the right
house
number.
down, so you can see there's a house that's missing right now. They took that down and had plans for it, but nothing's happened with it. So just
So
because,
it
again,
would
if
be a
it's rezoned,
similar
doesn't mean it's...
situation.
no.
Given that it's adjacent, I mean, it directly abuts the land associated with Harris Wayland.
Our town land.
So
Yeah.
does Sarah James.
Is there any
So it's a whole block.
possibility of, and I don't know what the circumstances would be that would allow it, but I mean, of the town somehow either purchasing those lots or somehow incorporating those lots into the land that they already
At this
own.
point, only if they donate it, just like this
Yeah, it's
property
kind of
did.
cost prohibitive to buy
Yeah.
6 or 7 houses at $200,000 for rough numbers to incorporate small acreage. I mean, we typically take large acreage. You know, we
Yeah.
bought the Filkins property because they had a big acreage on it. So you acquire one property for $200,000, which got us, I think it's 6.2 acres. To acquire 6 homes at $200,000 apiece, now you're at 1.2 million, which gets you less than,
And you're taking them off the tax roll.
you're taking them off the
Unless
tax
there's
roll.
something you can trade them for.
Like,
I don't know. I don't know what all the land the town
Well,
owns
think about
is.
the other thing too
Something
is,
else that you
number
don't know.
one,
So
they're
might
gonna have a tough time selling their houses as single-family residential houses on Route 250. It's just too difficult out there to live there. Secondly, and this is why we did it along the houses on Penfield Road, and we gave them back some value of their property when we did it. But the second part of that is, remember we talked about, there's only like 8% of the town is zoned commercial. It would not hurt to pick up 6 more spaces or 7 more spaces for a business non-retail office space setting. And even if you went to limited business at 2039, even if they put a McDonald's there or something, at least you're getting something out of it that you're not getting today. So, I mean, I think that property should probably be a limited business, because whoever's gonna build there is gonna want that traffic light to be built. And that's the only way you're gonna get them to do it, is to be able to get a return back. Office space doesn't give you that kind of.
So you'd have to do 2033 and 2039 limited business.
No, I would say 2033 could absolutely be business non-retail, because they're really gonna buy it to get access. They may not even
So
develop
all
it.
it's ever gonna be there is more likely a road.
also,
Right, exactly.
potentially-
There probably won't be anything of any value on that property after they tear the house down and build a roadway there.
All right, then I'm okay with that.
So I'd say go to business non-retail, if they can do something there, let them
You're
do it.
recommending 2039 as LB and then the rest of them as BNR.
Right, that's what I would think.
I agree.
The rest
you-
of them, including or excluding the 3 to the east?
No, the 3, I think we talked about possibly going into multi-residential, just to
Yeah,
kind of.
I think that should be a separate conversation. I think we should,
Yeah, let's do this first, then we'll talk about the 3.
Okay.
So what's the group's thought of 2039 being LB and then 2013 through 2033 being BNR?
yes.
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 Everybody good?
Got majority
Is
on
that your
that?
final vote right there?
Yeah, it's my final vote.
We can use that yes in perpetuity.
You
for the
sure
next-
can. We can continue with it. I gotta get home with my child. Get home from
See ya.
soccer.
Okay,
Six.
so we got that side.
Good luck.
Do we want to talk about the 3 units on the east side?
Right here.
Do we want to support MR for those 3 units? And again, town board decides rezoning, and we talk to the property owners before we rezone. Just because we recommend looking at it doesn't mean, 1, it's going to happen, or 2, the town board. We talk to the property owners and say, hey, guess what? George, we rezoned your property. And you're like, oh, that's nice. It'd been great if you asked me or talked to me about it. And
Well,
obviously,
I mean, if you make a recommendation, we're gonna go out and talk.
Oh, we talk to the people and have a
And we're not gonna
conversation
put you in a
before.
position where, I mean, we're not gonna send you into a public information meeting or a public hearing.
That George guy recommended.
He did. I mean, we would talk to all these people long before that and say, hey, there's been some thought processes
We
about.
just know, if there's no consideration for it, why should we go knock on doors and get people excited and say, hey, guess what, we're thinking of rezoning your property, and then we go back to the committee, and the
Well,
committee says,
let me ask.
no, we're not, and we go, never mind, sorry.
So the only reason I brought it up to you guys is because I'm looking at the map and it seems to make sense to me. If the experience at this end table says, nah, it's never gonna come up, then let's move on to the
It
next.
does make sense, because even the properties to the north that they built, they're on a private drive, it's well buffered from the street. These people aren't, they're right on the street, and it's gonna be difficult for them to sell their houses at some point in time too because of that. But if it were to go to multi-residential, and maybe somebody
Well,
buys the houses up and
No,
puts.
they've got Elderwood behind them, I mean, they
Elderwood
bought their
might buy it.
houses, that was just a
Maybe
wooded,
whoever would ever buy
Yeah,
that.
it's just a
Elderwood's probably
wooded
buy it,
parcel.
yeah.
They might, depending on what their needs are.
If it's zone MR, they could take those couple of houses and
Merge it
then create that.
That's
Assisted
what I'm
living
just thinking, it's
and-
already MR behind, or already up to the side, right behind them, so you just add those 3 and
But
you're done.
even if you're the owners, like your relatives, say they're getting elderly and they need some money to keep themselves in town, they could add on to the back of the house and create another duplex unit or something like that, rent that out to somebody or sell it to somebody and take the money and run, but
Because currently all those
If they wanna
properties
stay there, they
can't do
could.
that. All you can do is an in-law there.
Yeah, they're really limited now, but if
We just
if
put
you
a
gave them
few buildings in.
multi-residential, it could open up some doors for them.
So it would compensate for the decreased value of the land across from them.
What you look
coming
at
in
is
and
kind
all.
of, I won't say right zoning, but, you know, they obviously, they lost some potential or some value of their home once Elderwood was developed around and
Sure, I
behind
was
them.
just thinking that, yeah.
So now they get some value back, or at least the opportunity to sell their property if and when. That's a lot of, we've looked at along, you know, Penfield Road in 250 is, Daniel left, but I would never live there. Okay, now somebody at some point is going to try to sell their house, and if you can't sell your house
Because no one wants to live there.
and if nobody wants to live there, then maybe it's not zoned properly as, you know, it's no longer viable as a single family.
But if you had a
Zoning
two-family
district.
or a, you know, a fourplex or something like that there,
Well, I'm driving back to what you said, that the number of MRs across our town and the number of limited businesses is a very small percentage
We
overall.
have, basically, this is the only MR parcel that we have left that's viable for development today. We get calls all the time about MR and TH property. All of them are currently developed. So that's some of our suggestion as staff is we have a need or demand for MR, TH properties. Some of the stuff we looked at is, you know, senior living and everything else, but this is probably,
It's dense, but it's.
to my thought, I think this is the only MR parcel that we have left that is undeveloped, is that back portion of Elderwood. Everything else, we get calls all the time, what do you got for MR, what do you got for TH? We go, we got nothing that's undeveloped.
Zach, how big are those 3 properties?
Probably
they're not much more than a half
each.
acre each.
Yeah,
They're exactly
0.46.
20,000
Yeah.
square feet.
So they're 100 by 200.
100, so how much does that convert to in acres?
1.5, less than 1.5.
Just
In
shade less.
total?
Less
Yeah.
than
Less than
1.5.
1.5.
Each are .46.
So what would, if someone did do multi-residential there, what would be the sort of holding capacity? How many units could somebody, if somebody went and bought all 3
Not
of
many,
them?
because-
Those 6 tops. I mean, usually
Yeah.
you're looking at going
You'd probably
for
get a duplex unit on it instead of a
duplex.
single family house, you get a duplex. You'd get, if you bought all 3, you'd get 6.
But if the more
Okay.
likelihood is
Okay.
that the Elderwood would purchase those
Right.
and
We would-
incorporate them, then that
Maybe.
would be the
We
larger,
would
like,
like that because we know they used up space when they built the memory care addition
Yeah.
as part of their master plan for the whole property. You know, like Mark said, they planned cottages in the back, so if they continued down that path and found that a market study was there to support those cottages again, they would be really eager to pick up those 3 properties to square off the project.
and if they're already,
Makes it a lot easier.
zoned for
Yeah.
them to do that, then the incentive is doubly there.
Or there's support in the doc, if it hasn't been rezoned yet, for example, there's support in this document, like Jim was saying earlier, this document acts as a guide, and support for future decisions of the town, that yes, there was support for rezoning these properties. Heathwood, you've purchased them, you can request to rezone them as part of that process, as part of the bigger picture, to build out that last, the last.
And again, remember we talked about rezoning, the town board will not rezone property without knowing what the intent of the use of the property is.
Understood. So I'm good with having the vote then.
Group?
All aye?
I would say yes.
Aye, unanimous?
Wow.
The ayes have it.
You're innovative tonight, that's pretty impressive.
No, loving the discussion and
We picked the right people for the committee.
Conversation.
Evidently.
it's good
So,
conversation,
can I
and
go
you're
back
getting
to
into
the-
the whys and what, this is the stuff,
So
how we deal with it, and look at
you
it.
said something about us having exercised or leveraged all the MR that's currently in there. Is there any other areas that have been considered that we should be looking at that might be?
Lack of utilities, there are no.
Well,
Okay,
that
all right.
that brings us to our next one.
Yeah.
We're going down.
The good, the bad, now
We
the
got,
ugly.
we have 2 more.
We're going down to Browncroft.
We have
Okay,
2 more to
2
talk about.
Oh, Browncroft, no.
Well,
This is my home.
I know.
it may be an opportunity to change a pre-existing non-conforming use into something else. So we're
Did you
talking,
bring your
I know
checkbook?
which one you're talking about.
so we're talking about the Glendevere's property. We have had a request for Glendevere's. So right now, Glendevere's is in a single-family residential zoning district operating as a restaurant slash catering.
There it is.
Yes,
Business.
Oh,
They
okay.
have requested to be rezoned to something different, either MR or townhouse.
And we certainly don't want to go to commercial.
No, but MR would be, well,
Or we
MR
thought
gives a developer options.
possibly townhouse or whatever, if you took down the existing building and put up
So,
or TH.
so
Townhouses or
the
something.
topology of that, because I know there was a hill they wanted to take out for a parking lot, there's
Still
some
there.
They
other.
got permission.
Which they got approval for.
So just out of my,
Pull- yeah, pull up
who
the
hell
web.
is that? I'm sorry, and I don't normally talk that way, but that's,
You want the site plan or you want the
Just,
topo?
no, just pull up the wetlands and just show the minimal area
That's neat,
of what
Todd.
potential
Neat, Todd,
development is.
well, so yeah, I'm just so surprised they got the exception to take the hill out. I mean,
We,
The only, the reason, and I won't want to, I'm speaking on my behalf, not the board, but the board basically, I think, looked at, under the existing conditions, the amount of cars that park along Old Browncroft Boulevard has become an issue and a hazard under their current use for the fire marshal. You've got cars parking on both sides of the road, it's blocking the street, they have weddings and stuff for it. So I think the board, and I don't want to speak for them, approved it so that they could get cars off of the road and create more parking areas.
yeah,
for
but
them
you
down
realize
there.
that hill
The road
creates a
doesn't go
sound
anywhere.
buffer for those of us that live on the other side.
But
They're not taking
remember
the
what we
whole
said to
hill.
you though, early on, when we were in the education process, the E-pods are not prohibitive activities, they're regulated activities.
Oh, no, I got it.
So we
Let's
couldn't
just talk
prevent
about
them.
So I think that's
Yeah,
where the board
we
came
don't
to
need to
is,
rehash the
can
whole
we
stuff. Let's just talk
create
about
more of
what
a
we're-
parking lot, which then now takes the cars off of the road, gets, I mean, they're using it today, it's a restaurant, party house today, that's
It's a
not
viable
changing.
restaurant.
It's very viable, but you've got cars parking down both sides of Old Browncroft
So
Boulevard.
they're looking to have it rezoned so that they could be sold for another purpose.
Yes, his request is he doesn't want to run a party house forever, and he would rather sell the property, develop the property into townhouses, MR apartment
they're
units,
still trying to
whatever.
move ahead with the regrading. So
I mean, he's still moving on that, but he's thinking, once he's ready to retire, I don't want to be in the catering business anymore. If I could own 6 townhouses, 8 townhouses, and use them as rental units, I can generate an income off of rental units in lieu of running a party
We're not
house.
even sure you can get that many in there.
Again, I'm just
Tight spot.
throwing.
I mean, I would be okay from a townhome perspective, but speaking strictly as a homeowner, not on the board, I really wouldn't want an apartment building down there, to be honest.
that's where TH
And
allows
that's
for
the difference.
townhouses
We're
versus
saying townhouse, you could build, townhouses and you do. a
But if I
little
step
bit of-
back from that, from a viability standpoint of the property and the location, I mean, the location from a standpoint, here's the thing, if you've ever driven down Browncroft trying to get in or out of that road,
Unless
is
you're
a
making-
nightmare, and if the state's not gonna put a light there, you can't put a high capacity,
And that's,
Residential.
residential, I mean,
Well,
apartment building.
think about it for a
because-
second though.
Okay.
Think about it for a second, and this is what happened at Mario's. Mario's have 0 traffic coming to the site or leaving the site in the morning. They have a ton of traffic during the afternoon peak periods,
PM.
going up till like 9 o'clock at night.
Yep,
Now they want to tear that building down and build an apartment building there. Now you're going to have more people coming in the morning and leaving in the morning. Not that many more, but you're going to have more. You're going to have less people in the afternoon going to the site.
Significantly.
A significant number of people less than what they have there today. So in this case, you have parties for, what,
it's a quick Friday, Saturday.
75, 100 people
yeah, I mean,
maybe?
he does
Probably not
catering on the other
100.
days.
For a
and-
lot of cars.
But you're getting a lot of cars coming and going. And I agree with you, because I'm your neighbor. I just live beyond you a little bit. And it is dangerous. I mean, I would never make a turn out of there and go across and then go back up the hill again unless...
I did it only once, and scared
Nobody
the
was
crap
on
out of myself. I haven't done it.
But if you have people that are living there, and say you get 6, let's say 6, I'm thinking that's pretty generous, but 6 townhouse units, you're gonna have 2 people maybe living in the townhouse, each townhouse.
Yeah.
So you're talking 6 people, 12 people maybe. And then people coming to visit periodically, but on a day-to-day basis, you got way less people
Yeah,
coming to the site.
I think I could go with the town, and
That's
I
what
don't
you
want to say,
have
if
as a
we,
restaurant.
if we're making a recommendation and we do that, is that it's right in, right out, that they don't allow for that across the,
Well, that's
We don't
up to the
control
state
that.
Well,
DOT.
unfortunately, then you still got Baker Commodities
With
that's on the other
duplexes,
side.
they allow them.
And some people like to make that
Commodities brings
turn.
trucks in and
I
out.
don't, but...
Under TH, I mean, TH effectively
As well.
gives,
Comes off that same
but
access
TH
drive.
effectively gives
oh,
you that.
Baker's, but they're curved, yeah,
Like
that's
townhouse
right.
to be
This
2 or
is,
3
the road
units.
is closed right here, so Old Browncroft doesn't continue up.
Yeah, I know, that
Yes.
the bridge has been out for, what, 25
The
years?
nice thing though is you get a pre-existing non-conforming commercial use out of a residential neighborhood. And you get it back into a residential setting.
Yeah, I would say townhomes, I'm good with that.
And Roland, what was your question?
It was with regard to duplexes.
But a townhouse effectively gets you there. I mean, so a townhouse can be structured as duplex, a
Two-family,
triplex,
three-family.
a fourplex.
You know,
I think you should
you live
point
there
out,
too.
I think you should point out to the committee the actual limitation of the property with the wetland buffer.
Oh, it's astronomical.
That's why,
I mean,
that's why
you
Jim
see
is saying
that-
6 is
You
tough.
see this? That's
So-
your actual.
It's where the hill is the
So
only
in essence, they-
developable portion of the property.
The dark, the
Well, they would
the
have to tear
navy
down the
blue is the
building.
wetland buffer, the light blue is the wetland itself.
So-
So that the hook is your actual, at the moment, buildable
Well,
area.
right now, the DEC would probably allow anything that's been paved over to be redeveloped. But you're right, there is not a lot of usable area on that property.
And that's why we're saying 6
And
units,
that's all the
whatever.
more
that-
reason.
The question you have is, can you run in 6 townhomes and still make them viable?
We don't know.
That's his,
He's said that he would like to get out of this business and do something with the townhouse.
That's his,
I think that if we can get him out of that business and do something with the townhouse, he'll have to come back.
Yeah,
and-
I mean,
he's requested rezoning and, you know,
I say give them the townhomes and. let
Remember,
them
you're not
come to the plan.
rezoning it, you're just making recommendations.
Yeah.
You're trying to get rid of a pre-existing non-conforming use.
I'd
Yep,
support
no,
that.
We're offering a
I'd support
guideline.
that in the town.
Yep,
is the group supportive of that?
yes.
Yes. I don't say I could make money at it, but sure.
I don't either, that's gonna be up to him to figure it out. And it won't get rezoned unless we can show that he's gonna do it right and not be an impact.
But at least there's a
Now we just need to
recommendation.
get Baker Commodities to go townhomes.
Go to townhomes,
yeah. Yes, that'd be lovely.
Well, at least they're not
they're not cooking
they're
anymore.
not
That's
cooking
it.
the carcasses anymore, so I'm okay.
DEC can.
What is the
reclaim their
height
buffer.
restriction on townhomes in Penfield, or is there one?
Well, yes, if you were to build a straightforward townhouse, it's 2 stories or 35 feet, whichever's less.
Okay.
And they probably would do a 2-story townhouse for each of these.
Yeah.
And then the last one we had on the list was the, again, up in your neighborhood, on the corner of the daycare.
Oh, the corner of the daycare.
So we haven't seen you lately, just want to give you some updates. That property is in really bad shape.
But people are
If you haven't
calling about
noticed.
it.
I've had,
Oh, I've been watching it fall apart over the last
well, I
week.
wanted to talk to you at the last meeting, but I missed you, so I wanted to tell you
Property
that
line.
we've had numerous people call us about doing various things with it. I've had 2 realtors call me about the possibility of converting it into like a 6-unit, like studio apartments.
With the existing building.
With the existing building. They'd have to do a ton of work to get it to a point where it would have to be that, but the intent would be to get rid of the playground, but keep the parking lot and clean it up as green space area.
Unlikely egg garages.
I actually asked a local developer to look at it with the possibility of tearing it down and then building a couple houses in its place that would meet code. I haven't heard back from him, so I'm assuming he did that and taken care of. But he did look for
I mean,
me, so
the
I
existing code,
appreciated
you'd probably
that.
get 2, and the cost of buying the property, demoing the house to build 2 houses back.
That's half acre zoning in there, and that's
It
how
is.
big is the property? It's
It's
one.
not that big, it's 1.3 or 1.6, I think,
About 1, because you have to
1.3.
factor in this little block that's also part of the property.
but that's useless.
Yeah, so I say you can
It's
get
about 1.
2 units in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
half acre
yeah,
zoning.
half acre zoning, you're gonna get 2 units in there, and just the demolition cost alone, taking that house out and that parking lot would be astronomical.
You're only gonna
Buying the
get,
property.
you're probably gonna get $60,000 per lot to build a new house on it. So that's $120,000 that you're gonna get out of it. It's probably gonna cost you almost that to tear the house down and get rid of it, or remediate it, one of the two. So it's almost not worth it to anybody.
So
to
what
do
is
it.
the rezoning that was asked for?
This is not.
No,
an
it's
answer.
not.
Recommendation.
We're just throwing this
This is
out
a
there
staff
to
one.
get input
Yeah.
from you.
How do we resolve?
How do we
this
deal with it?
Problem.
Because no one wants a daycare there.
If you make it a townhouse and they can get 6, 8 units in there, does that make it viable, and is that a betterment for the neighbors to have 6
Yeah,
or 6 or 8,
you
not
probably
going
won't
throwing
get eight.
random numbers up, 6 or 8 townhouse units
I'm just
versus
gonna tell you, that you people on the board know that, you know the neighbors as well as I do in that area, so anything that was other than purely a house.
But it might never be that again. I mean, what'll happen
No,
is
I'm just saying.
she's not
that-
taking care of it. We're gonna end up having to, actually, we already have sent a ticket to her to court to start fixing the exterior up. But the interior is worse than the exterior, and the interior's got all sorts of issues that have to
So
be
yes,
addressed.
idyllically, the neighbors would
Nobody's
say,
gonna spend the money to
put
do
2 houses
single-family
back in there, but
residence.
economically.
I think you would
can't get there,
probably,
so-
to be honest, that they would, the conversation around townhomes, with owned homes versus apartments, yeah, apartments, I just don't, it's gonna be, it won't fit into the neighborhood, to be honest with you. But I think townhome, I can make a case and say townhomes would, because even though they're,
If you could do 4, I don't know the numbers, 4
they could
units
do
or something.
they could do 4 or 5 units in there,
If the
yeah.
math works, that, you know, you'd keep the parking lot in the middle and have,
Yeah, I mean, that to me, I certainly would be willing to have
You
the,
gotta realize,
and make
though,
the recommendation, and still, you're still gonna go to the neighborhood to do that.
if that was remodeled though, I mean, if you're only talking 6 units in that building, a lot less going on there than just the daycare that was there 5 days a week.
No, I'm not disagreeing with it, but to speak frankly, the neighbors did not shed a bitter tear when the daycare center closed down.
Oh, bet.
So, I'm just saying, from a standpoint of thinking about the neighborhood as a whole, and the people who live there, and the dynamics of that neighborhood, townhomes that were owned by folks would probably go over a lot easier, you get a lot less pushback, and people would be more likely to agree to that.
But then you'd have to rezone that one parcel to townhouses. That's almost spot zoning in that neighborhood.
Well, yeah, that was my
I
next
mean, if somebody
question.
came to you and said, hey, we want to rezone this to commercial
So
or
the-
car, you wouldn't want that.
All right,
Yeah,
hold on.
I
What
mean,
zoning,
it's 1 acre now, right?
No,
No, it's half
no,
acre.
Half acre.
that's not my question. What zoning now would be available with a special permit to allow that to take place?
incentive
It
zoning.
would have to be an incentive zoning program, you're right. And it might be worth it. I mean,
To
the neighborhood doesn't want to see a
impact.
blighted building in their
Part of the
property.
incentive, maybe
To
demoing
minimize
existing
spot zoning.
structure and.
Rebuilding
building
townhouses.
Town, you know, but I mean, that's in,
So what would this incentive zoning?
Yeah, and the incentive zoning, the incentive would be that you get rid of the old building.
With a special permit?
Well, just, it's a site
Well, it's
plan
incentive
under
zoning.
incentive zoning,
Yeah.
there's no additional permit.
Normally, incentive zoning is the developer's paying
So you don't
money
have
for
a
a public
provision like
improvement.
that with a special
The public
permit?
improvement would be to get rid of the
No, it
house.
just,
No,
it
it's
falls
a-
under a development tool in a zoning district, so the
Hmm.
zoning would stay the same. It would just.
Which I really wanted to do. I don't want to change the zoning in that neighborhood for one parcel. We don't do, that sets a precedent. We just don't
we're
want
just
do
trying to
that.
wrap our heads around how do you get around the economical cost of buying the property, demoing the building, demoing the parking, and then putting up 2 houses. To me, the math doesn't,
It's kind of
the
interesting.
math doesn't work
I
to
mean,
get back to this. So
if
you're,
that's all that you can do on that property, it's just gonna probably sit.
you're just gonna end
It's
up
it,
with a
George,
property
it's
that just
interesting
sits
what
and
you said a
rots
minute
and-
ago, because the developer I talked to said, I don't know if I can do 2 houses, but if I could do if I could do 4 or 5 townhouses, I could probably pull it off.
So could they get an exception, so rather than rezoning, could the town issue them an exception for that?
Well, it would be
variance?
incentive zoning, and that you keep the zoning the way it
Something to work
is.
with the town board to.
And the
Then that
incentive
would
obviously
be
is
my
to-
recommendation for it, then,
That
is
was
to,
the question.
yeah.
That was Roland's question.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's probably a good recommendation, because I have a feeling nobody's gonna wanna buy that building for a single-family residence, and if they're not gonna do that, it's gonna
You
sit there.
you couldn't afford to. I mean, if they sold you the building for $1, by the time you
Still gotta
demo the
put
property, you
$100,000 in.
gotta put $100,000 into asbestos abatement, lead abatement,
Right.
the house, demo the building,
At
demo
this
the
point,
parking lot,
That's what.
cleanup of the
my
site, and then
recommendation
just
would
start
be how to proceed.
infrastructure for 2
With the
homes.
incentives?
You're upside down before, you know.
It's a good
you
recommendation.
Got it for $1.
Do you think the neighborhood could tolerate 4 or 5 ownership townhouses?
I think that it would be a split, but I think the majority would probably
So,
agree to it. I mean,
so all
in lieu of watching the house slowly decay and
All
fall
they're doing,
apart. I
all
mean,
they're doing is driving past it, and you know that. I
Unless
mean,
the church wants
it's not like they're interacting with it. It's
Well,
on
yeah,
the corner property.
there you go.
what?
Well,
They would go for a church there in a minute.
No, not,
you
not
can't-
now.
No, I'm being a little facetious.
Wait a minute, you can't prohibit that.
You can't.
Under.
No.
No, but,
First
I mean, that's, you really don't want that.
No.
No,
Church is not what they
I
used to
mean,
be. Church isn't for Sunday anymore, believe me.
No, I like the thought process.
And you know,
of-
Browncroft Community
If you-
Church in our
if so,
neighborhood, that's a busy.
The guy you were talking
Yeah,
to,
but you can't prohibit that, but that's not.
No, you can't prohibit
that's
it, you're
not
absolutely
the-
right.
That was just another,
But if you get a developer that would
It's
be willing to do that, if you think the neighbors could tolerate ownership townhouses, they're not gonna get many there, but if you could get 4 or 5, he said he would do it. And he's gonna talk to the owner about it, but I was a little nervous about that, because I do know the sensitivity in the neighborhood. I really.
well, again, but if you look at it, if you're honest, when you look at the situation, many of the folks that live in that neighborhood are pretty smart folks. they don't want a decaying property
Right,
on the corner
right.
like that either, so.
It's the gateway to your entire
doesn't-
neighborhood.
Help your property values either, if you've got a,
No, it does
Building
not.
that's falling apart.
That's actually come up with a couple of my neighbors. They're worried about especially the ones that are closer to that property.
once you resale, you pull up and that thing's falling apart, you're not buying the house next door.
What are the properties across the street there? You said the little square property belongs
It's
to
a
the
slope,
daycare.
it just falls off.
Falls off to the cliff.
There's one house
But
on the
who
other side
owns-
over there.
Does somebody own,
Yeah,
are
but they
there
had,
homes
they
on
had
those?
terrible slope failure
That's the
problems
county
several years
road.
ago. We had to go in and let them come in and redevelop the whole slope area.
But those do have.
The county owns
They
this.
almost lost their garage.
The county,
the county owns
this.
that.
This is a house.
Okay.
That's the Noblets, they're artists.
That's
the
county. This is all part of the state's right of way.
Okay.
This
Yeah.
border all the
I
way
think that one little
across.
square is part of that corner parcel.
This square here is
Yeah.
part of this property,
That's
but the
pretty steep
address is
there.
on it.
Oh, yeah,
It is.
it goes over a cliff at that.
Seeing it out of the context.
Yeah,
you're
that's not gonna be
walk that.
developed.
And then we continue into the rest of the county land that leads into wetlands.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Very fair question. Who's over there?
So there's nothing they can do with that little parcel then anyways.
And I'm not sure, I mean, by the time you guys
Should be
get your
donated to the
documents,
county.
well, maybe, I mean, we're gonna do it the first part of next year, but, you know, if that developer were to come in tomorrow and say, hey, I've talked to the owner, she's willing to sell it to me, I wanna go to the town board and talk about the possibility of going to incentive zoning for what you're proposing, I guess I wouldn't stop them from doing that, because I don't wanna see that neighborhood get blighted any more than it is with
No,
that
I
building.
agree.
I mean, but I think it's a good recommendation, and if it fits into
That's why
the,
we wanted to bring it to this group and talk about it. We were trying to figure out how do you
You guys
solve
talk
that?
about the properties that are along the, Browncroft?
The frontage ones?
Yeah. Especially the one that's got, yeah, because there's,
We've brought those up a couple of times, and the last time we talked to those neighbors, and
They like it.
none of them wanted to
yeah,
change.
they're happy.
okay. Because I know there's one
The only-
business, there's one business farther down that's kind of falling apart.
That one?
Yes.
Oh,
the
Masters,
Mileage master.
mileage masters.
Yeah, we gotta go after her on getting the building cleaned.
We've had
up.
requests from, 2476, and go to the east. If you turn zoning on.
Got it here.
Yep, those two right there are part of what was MRB's business there. We've had requests from the neighbor originally on, 2172 to rezone that parcel, and we said, well, we look at that, you can look at all of them, and the last time we checked, those people have said, no, we're happy, and leave it be, so.
I mean, if you don't have the request, you don't, I can see that the houses there are mostly fairly well
They
maintained.
do,
You
they
drive by
take
them
really
all the
good care of their
time, so.
properties along that
We
stretch.
haven't had anybody approach us to say, hey,
There's good pride of ownership there.
help us out, so.
As a matter of fact, it's interesting, we did several years ago, a study for that area, which eventually had back drives and all that business
Turn
behind
zoning
it.
on, so.
And did recommend some changes in zoning, but they didn't really want to do it, and
We'll look
they're all
at,
still there.
When was the last time that it was brought up for the zoning potential?
I think it was the 2010, or 2000, yeah,
No,
2000.
it was
2000?
20 years ago or so, yeah.
Yeah, so 20 years is a
Look at it.
long
We
time.
did
I
a
mean,
whole study of that intersection.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago, because it was before I got married, and I lived over there in White Village with my,
Yeah, well, you remember those
That-
public
that was
hearings
about
we did.
that time.
Yeah, right.
because that was when they were talking about extending the old Browncroft, because
Exactly,
they didn't want to put a stoplight there.
right.
I'm always surprised as you look at Blossom. Those are limited business zoned houses well past the plaza down there, and those still operate as single
The
family
single
houses.
family,
So
they've never
they're
converted
limited
over.
business, and not a one
But I
of them
mean,
is
here's the
converted
thing.
over to.
So, and I agree, that, but remember, by putting in like either limited business or non-retail, you're not telling the homeowner they have to convert,
Right.
but you're setting it up so that if in future state, if we think in the
Yeah.
next 10 years that it could be,
They could stay for as long as they want, it's up to
I mean,
them.
so that's the reason I'm talking about making the recommendation, because you've already got one or two people have asked, so you've already
Yeah, but I
extended
gotta tell
to.
you, I remember 2472, it was owned by a guy, but he owns a hair salon down in Penfield Road by the plaza down there now. He wanted to rezone that property. Neighbors came out in mass and said, don't do it. We don't want a domino effect in our neighborhood.
But how many years ago was that?
Well, they're the same people. They haven't left.
Yeah,
I
but
know them all.
they're a lot closer to retirement
Yeah, but
and
that was-
downsizing, I mean.
They would come knocking on our door
That
if
was
that were the issue, and they
But
haven't.
4 or 5 years
Okay, fair
ago.
enough.
And like you said, they do take good care of their
That
property.
request was, yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, if you
MRB
can zoom in on the 24, I call it the brown house and the white house that were there,
Here?
Yep, zoom in on those two houses right there. The gentleman that owned that as well as the current parcel wanted to see if he could fit a Tim Hortons in there. So he went out and sought the neighbors, and they all came out and said, no, we don't want to
Don't do
change
it.
it, because he couldn't fit it, so he wanted, that's what he'd say. That was only 4 or 5 years ago.
That's right.
He wanted to rezone 2472 so he could come over further, and the neighbors all came out and said,
He said,
nope, we don't
"Don't
want
do
it,
it."
leave it alone. And that was just
Okay.
in the last
No problem.
5 years that
Yeah.
that came up, so.
And I think you cannot underestimate the domino effect when one person does something, especially if it's somebody with a middle property who decides to,
Well, yeah, and the
Do
other part is as soon as you
denigrates
change one,
everyone
you
else's
affect the guy next to him, and now he's stuck, and now
Yeah.
he might not even want a zoning change, but now he's got to do it because
yeah.
he's stuck with it.
And to your point, I mean, on Penfield Road, the one parcel in the middle has developed, but the town board was petitioned by all 9 residences to be rezoned.
Yeah, they came to us.
So they came to us, all 9
Exactly.
came in and said, we
Right.
want to be rezoned, so if the
Yeah.
one next to you happened to change over before you sold
They
your
didn't
house,
care.
at least you knew what you were buying into and you have to be
Yeah.
rezoned,
Yeah.
so.
Right.
Yeah, nobody's come to us asking for it. I'm still amazed. I drive by it twice a day, every day, and
No,
they do take good care of the
bathing, yeah.
problems. Are there any other properties that you've thought of over the last several weeks since we've been talking about this that you question or wonder about? We didn't have that many. I mean, we talk about 13,000 parcels in town. The 10 or 12 that we looked at, that's not really that many over a 10-year period.
So I guess my question, I would ask, and maybe I missed it over the last 2 weeks, part of the conversation was, were there any areas that were going to be recommended for mixed use beyond what was done in the 2010 plan?
No,
And did we
I don't
feel
think so.
there was a need for that?
The problem is that we're not, it's all sewer driven, and even the mixed-use district that we have right now doesn't have access to, much of it does not have
Well,
access to.
it's growing sewers as it goes, so each parcel, as we kind of talked, it's starting from the
gonna take a while
periphery,
for that
it's
to
growing into
develop.
the sewer, so each, similar to the road, we have them extend their piece up and the next piece extends
So
up.
what are we thinking from a recommendation standpoint, that they should continue to add those as it makes sense? Or, I mean, we probably should at least put something in our document that talks about.
Well, we can talk about how mixed, since the 2010 plan, mixed use has been implemented. We've had, up to this point, one successful project come through the site plan review process. We have potentially a couple more coming in. And it's to, encourage that process to continue. And as you said, potentially evaluate other properties that come up that are suitable areas for it. Nothing's really popped up on our radar.
No.
Fair enough, I just want to make sure that I hadn't missed where.
No, you haven't, and the Four Corners is basically a mixed-use district, and, it is what it is. You got some apartments upstairs over some of these buildings. The LaSalle's Landing District is actually a mixed-use district, although it's turning out not to be that, for one reason or another. And the problem that you're running into in a lot of the commercial zones is, back in the day, you'd have somebody that maybe wanted to live upstairs and then have their business downstairs, but you're not seeing that anymore. You're seeing, a good example is these restaurants coming in like Chili's a couple of years ago on Empire Boulevard. Even when we were dealing with Walgreens and Rite Aid, we thought the possibility of maybe doing something upstairs and having rental space. They don't want it. They don't want to be landlords to people that are not part of their business. So as a result, you're not seeing a lot of interest on people's parts to build, upstairs rental and then downstairs business. Not on small property.
And plus, a lot of the commercial stuff that we have is built out. We have a few more that are left to get built right now. In terms of residential, those neighborhoods exist. The mixed use really came about because, as we said early on, the YMCA is a huge generator for that area, and really nothing is significantly built around it. There are a few houses along 250 there, but really that was a blank canvas of development as opposed to rezoning other areas in town that exist today.
Yeah, it's a bedroom community too. I mean, you don't want to go to a point where all of a sudden 40% of it's commercial instead of 10%.
Yeah, nope, agreed.
Rounded up a little bit there.
A little bit. Good job tonight.
Good discussion.
Really good job.
So on the agenda, we threw on the next meeting dates for January. After we get past the holiday, we're proposing to come back into more of a 2 meeting a month schedule like we did early on in the process. Because our task now as staff is to start writing the document in its draft form. Somewhere between a 50% and 75% draft for you to consider as we get into these next months, and then we start addressing sections of the document and refining it as we go along. What are you looking for?
Done. So we could meet again on Christmas Day in the afternoon if you'd like.
Sure.
No. huh?
You'll be here by yourself.
Have fun, let us know how it goes.
Actually, I
Depends on how close with my
appreciate you.
family, he might actually have somebody here.
No, actually, I was
place
gonna
to
say,
be.
I appreciate
Go
you
to the
meeting
town hall.
tonight, because I know that we talked about not meeting until after the holidays, but I do appreciate you doing it. It helped us a lot.
It was better to get
conclusion
this
to-
stuff out of the way.
Yeah, exactly, so it was a big help to do
good,
this, so I appreciate
Good to
it.
wrap up that.
Tim, I have one final question that
Ask away.
a number of people have been asking me
Do I need a
about.
computer for
And
it?
that is, no, it's the
No.
barn at Shadow Pines.
It's what?
The barn at Shadow Pines.
Funny you
And
should bring that up.
Hearing that it's gonna get knocked down.
It's
they
not
have
gonna
all
get
kinds
knocked
of
down.
stuff.
It's probably gonna blow down before it ever gets knocked down. But I will tell you, I'm actually meeting with Jim Prum tomorrow afternoon at
Okay.
1 o'clock. He's got some guy that's gonna come in and look at the barn. I don't know what he wants to do with it.
Okay,
But we're open to suggestions. If somebody wants to come in and lease that barn out from the town, we're supportive of it.
No imminent plans for it.
There's no plan for it. There's no intent to take it down. There's no intent to put any money into it either. But if somebody wants to come along and do that, they're more than welcome. I'm gonna meet with this guy tomorrow. I don't know what his intent is. I think Jim got him as a friend who's willing to look at it from a construction-based rehab type setting and figure out how much it would cost to fix it. Because I think in Jim's mind, he would like to, and I give him all the credit for it, he would like to start a donation process where they could get enough money to fix it up. But he's not been in the barn yet to see what it
Yeah,
is.
it's structurally
It's-
really
no,
unsound, yeah.
I'm familiar.
You've been in it, so, but that's okay. I mean, money can fix anything if you throw enough money at it. And if somebody wants to do that, that's fine. We just need
What
to
would
find.
the use be? I mean, it would.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you could use it for a number of things if you wanted. I
Well,
mean,
right now it's associated with Park House property anyways.
yeah, but I mean, if somebody wanted to put money into it, maybe create an event barn or something like
Yeah.
that there, they'd have to be conscious of the fact that there are neighbors around there, so you're not gonna have the Rolling Stones in there at midnight.
It's also not that big of a building.
It's not that big, really. I mean, that's the big problem. We're a bigger building, it might be more amenable to parties and stuff.
Well, now you get into building code and accessibility issues, and you've gotta have
Bathrooms,
access and fire
It gets
codes.
crazy.
and it-
But that's okay. If he's willing to bring somebody in, I'm willing to take him over and let him walk through.
Where do you stand with the Clark House? Is the other
The
meeting?
Clark House, we are working with a guy right now, we're preparing a leasing agreement with him. He wants to continue to utilize the Clark House as a restaurant, but he also has a business called Tryon Bikes, and he sells and repairs bikes, and he wants to use the old, not the cart house, but the pro shop area for that purpose.
Okay.
But what it sounds kind of goofy, but what he does is, he conducts all these charity events, like 100K races and 25K races, and that would be a staging point for people to come and eat, and then go on their bike rides, and then come back and eat again if they wanted. But it would still be open to the public, to go to the public restaurant as well. So he does have kind of a good business plan. He's a smart enough guy to know he's not a restaurateur, but he does have restaurateurs looking at it with him as a partner.
Okay.
So we're trying to work through that right now. Hopefully, we'll have a lease in place before the end of the year, I'm hoping.
Cool.
He wants to get in there in March and start doing some work.
Cool.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great holiday. See ya.